let's start the show.
For Thursday, March 17th, 2016. Welcome to This Is Only a Test, the official podcast of Tested.com. Hello. Hi, everyone. Do you guys watch Seinfeld? No?
Hello. I'm forbidden from doing that voice, it turns out.
Oh.
My wife doesn't like it.
Okay, well.
Which is funny, because I think
She's
that's
not
what
here?
this show is about. Isn't
She's
it?
not here.
Isn't that the episode? The girlfriend doesn't like the voice, and he has to choose between the woman and the voice?
And he chose the voice.
The voice is good.
Well, good thing you chose the woman.
I made the other choice.
Yeah. All right. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of This Is Only a Test. I am Norm, and to my left, we got two people here to talk about virtual reality.
That's what we're good at.
We got Jeremy and Will.
Hello.
Hello. I'm Will.
So this is GDC week, and we're going to jump into a full, long, big VR minute very shortly. So I know a lot of people out there, they listen to the podcast for a lot of different reasons, and we will cover some tech news in the beginning, but just to put it out there, there's a lot of game and virtual reality talk this week, because that's just what's in the news. The hardware is coming out soon, and we've seen a lot of new stuff.
It's just walking around GDC, it seems like the virtual realities are the thing that everybody wants to talk about.
Yeah, it's what the industry, I mean, it's this year's hot stuff. It's been in the works publicly for 3 years in our consciousness, and it's finally coming to fruition. But and I also want to apologize for people watching the video. There is a bar blocking my face from the camera.
You want me to move that?
No, because that's our Vive bar.
You can recalibrate. It takes like 3 minutes.
I'm not going to be here for the next week and a half.
Okay.
And so we shot a Vive video, and our office is relatively small, so our Vive lighthouse is blocking my face. So because I also like to obscure my face with the microphone, now I have two things: the camera, the bar.
This didn't happen by accident.
And also the microphone. But first, let's get through some technology news, for which we don't have a musical intro, because I guess the whole podcast intro is supposed to be that. I'll take musical intros for tech news. Let's talk about DeepMind for a minute, because last week, Jeremy, you and Kishore were totally into DeepMind.
Well, sure. It's an exciting development. The AlphaGo has beaten... gosh, I don't even remember his name now. That's how...
It's just some meat
such
bag,
a VR week.
right?
It is now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just a brain.
Well, he won... AlphaGo won 4 games. The Korean gentleman lost one. Or
Lee Sedol.
Thank you. He won 1 game. So that's good, right?
Yeah.
One for the
humans. No total domination just yet.
And he even said as much. He said, the computers are not fully, superior yet.
You haven't ranked silver. Silver League. Computer is diamond.
I mean, but how many points did he lose on that? He's got to be dropping down from the top of diamond toward platinum again.
Wait till next season.
What did you guys read that Wired article?
No.
We talked about it a little bit on Still Entitled this week, but there was a really good Wired article that explained kind of the context behind this. Because if you don't, Go is an incredibly complex game that even the best people play largely using intuition and like pattern recognition and stuff like that. So they talked to one of the other Go masters who was the one who did the initial playtest against the DeepMind, against AlphaGo, and then has been playing it constantly for the last 9 months. And as a result, like one of the interesting takeaways from that was, as a result of playing this neural network based AlphaGo computer, his play has dramatically improved.
That's interesting, because Michael Redman, the commentator, said as much. When he was watching the games, he said, I can say at this point that I could probably learn something from AlphaGo. Yeah,
he said just the first kind of mention of this was when the computer made a move that the human said was beautiful and unexpected and intuitive, but unlike anything he'd seen before. And that's the kind of thing that the master who's been training the computer for the last 9 months or year, however long it's been, had said as well.
I wonder if there is. It's interesting that the human still won one game though, because if it had been a complete wash, then we might say, well, that's it. I mean, that's the computers are superior at this point. I wonder. I don't know.
It's
very
still
well.
too small sample size. Five games is still too
Okay,
small.
but I'm sure if the greatest chess computer could play a grandmaster, they'd probably. Am I correct? When's the last time that a grandmaster beat a computer at chess? I don't imagine it happens anymore.
The rules of boxing are really not fair.
Right.
The fact that it's built up from one match, and that determines who's the best.
My question is, though, when it comes to Go, and I don't know the game well enough, but I wonder if at this level, if you are just extremely good, there's just a level at which it's an even game, more or less, and that we will always have great players be able to beat a computer. If you can just play it at that level, since you can't calculate the infinite number of possibilities.
Well,
But the computers can also get better. They'll still get better.
Yeah,
They'll
I mean-
just try a different path, a different algorithm to get there.
in 10 years, who says the computers can't calculate all the infinite possibilities, right?
I don't know. That's a lot of possibilities.
I mean, it's not quite infinite. It's almost infinite.
Yeah, I suppose when it gets towards the end game, then that's certainly true. I think they can calculate most of the possibilities at that point.
My understanding was that in the match that the computer lost, it made an early error and then was kind of chasing the entire rest of the game. I didn't actually. I watched the first couple and haven't watched the more recent ones because I've had other stuff going this week.
Well, it's
been
an interesting
busy.
story. I think people are more interested in Go now. That's
Really?
cool.
Are you going to learn how to play Go?
I went to a coffee shop and there was a sign-up sheet for a new Go club.
Oh, there you go.
That's so Bay Area.
It really is.
Oh, was that at like the local hacker space, the hacker
No,
dojo?
It was a Starbucks.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want the AI that can do simple things. Just make the better Roombas. Roomba iRobot announced a new, not a Roomba, but one of their new robots that will do mopping of floors for bathrooms. I want one of those. I want one that can do shop maintenance. That can go around a shop, like a
vacuum?
shop vac. The
Yeah,
shop
that would
vac
be nice.
Roomba that will clean up the floor
Isn't that-
and also absorb. I guess you need
That's just a Roomba, isn't it?
right, but I want also the one with the powerful enough vacuum. Maybe a tethered one that can then also just pull in stuff from the air, sawdust from the air.
Well, you should filter that sawdust before it gets to the air. That's the lesson of the shop. You should have the filtration. Look, people yelled at me about this.
Right.
You have to have the thing on the machine in the
bag
room.
attached to the machine.
Yeah, and the vacuum attached to the machine rather than the bag is even better. Anyway, did you see that Waze updated and now you can tell it, you can schedule a drive. You can say, hey, I need to be here by this time, and it will tell you when to leave.
Okay.
So it's kind of it has that information if it hooks up to your calendar, which is why I like Waze. When you fire up Waze in the morning and you get in the car, it says, hey, are you going to your first appointment? If the location is there as an address, it'll say, are you going to 790 Brannan Street? And you say yes. And then it says, okay, here's your route. You're going to get there at this time. But now it'll actually notify you and say, hey, you need to leave in like 10 minutes or you're going to be late.
Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's owned by Google, and that's a Google
Google,
feature.
Google now does that, but Waze's nav is a little bit more robust, I find, than
Aren't
Google.
they? It's the same company.
It's kind of the same, but not exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's interesting that with one company owning two technologies and integrating one to the other, they would still keep it as a separate service and tailor it for people who use it in a specific way.
It's a power user thing, right? So with Waze is about people who want to contribute to the game and upload their data to the cloud, so to the service. So they'll upload hazards and cars on the side of the road and stuff like that, and then that data pops up in Google Maps for all the people who just want to get fed the info. The benefit of using Waze is you can hit the routes button and get alternate routes if you get stuck in traffic and you would rather go a little bit slower or take a little bit longer on a route where you're moving faster.
I mean, this is the AI and technology that actually can affect our everyday lives, but it's also the least sexy type of technology and advancements. Like, you don't see science fiction movies in the 80s predicting in the future, oh, guess what the hot new technology in 2016 is going to be?
Hoverboards. They predicted that.
10-minute notifications so you won't be late to the meeting.
Hoverboards,
Yeah. Real-time traffic analysis and notifications about accidents a mile down the road.
Look, Back to the Future got it right. There are hoverboards.
There are things that call themselves hoverboards.
Yeah, they're not very good.
Actually, I think the what is the Hendo board? They have a Model 2 now.
Yeah, I saw that
Already?
in partnership with Tony Hawk.
Yes, and it's still hovering on top of your sheet metal.
Yeah, call me when it doesn't do that.
Yes, but it has I think more hover pads, so it's more balanced, and you can actually glide around.
It uses magnets.
It uses I believe superconducting magnets. I'm not
Okay.
sure. But those hoverboards that are self-build hoverboards, and what the mainstream has called hoverboards, basically the gyroscopic two-wheel personal movers, the international ones are now banned from sale in U.S.
So that means if you want a hoverboard, you're basically going to get a one wheel or
Segway.
Your thing, the skateboard.
The
Boosted board?
Boosted board.
But boosted board isn't gyro-based, and boosted board is remote controlled.
What's the reason for
true.
the ban? Is it a battery issue?
It's not because the batteries are catching fire, not because of the YouTube videos of people opening their hoverboard boxes and then subsequently
Like bursting into flames?
It's because of patents. It's the same reason that the hoverboard booth was raided at CES.
No way.
So Segway has the patents on that kind of gyroscopically controlled. But my understanding was that the hoverboards, the hack on the hoverboards is they actually aren't gyroscopically controlled, is that it's just a mechanical linkage.
Tell Dean Kamen.
That is for the courses aside,
Okay.
not for the hosts of.
We'll see
This is
them in
only a
East
test.
Texas, I guess.
Hey, but one technology from Back to the Future that's just announced and real. This is it.
Time machine.
Now we're getting new DeLoreans, but not still
Really?
a time machine.
We're getting new DeLoreans?
DeLorean DMC companies, they're allowed to make several thousand of the DeLoreans.
They had the parts.
Wow.
They just had the parts.
I just want the
People wanna
Sports
know?
Almanac from 2015. That seems like a perfect thing to get.
I'm pretty sure you can make your own from 2015. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can make your own.
Look, imagine what I could do with that today.
Self-tying shoes, Nikes. They're calling them the Nike Hyper Adapt 1.0.
I've had these for a long time. You just put the elastic laces in, then you stretch them out when you want to put your foot in. And, you cinch it. It cinches back down when your foot's in there. You don't need any magical technology there.
Upon closer inspection, these are loafers.
Yeah.
These are they do not look like the shoes from Back to the Future. That's the biggest disappointment. They may have a motor. There's some technology in them. You press the plus button. They're supposed to learn how tight you want the shoe, and you press the button automatically. It self-ties, self-laces. It's just a tightening system underneath the shoe.
Yeah.
But they design, and it lights up, but they do not look like the 80s shoes.
Will this make you better at whatever sport it is you buy these shoes to play?
No. It's purely
make you better at anything,
it's
man.
purely a marketing play. Like, okay, they could have approached it a couple ways. They clearly wanted to develop because it was their brand and they wanted to get the attention. But if it actually is a technology that they see people using in the future, then I can see why they designed it to be a more fashionable, modern-looking shoe. I don't think it's something that people are going to want in the future.
Paint a word picture, Norm.
Of the shoe?
Yeah.
Okay, so the I guess I have
Is it like a
to remember.
Spazike?
Hyper
Is it like what does it look like?
So it doesn't have that high top look that the
originals did?
The originals did, nor does it have the Velcro band with the old Nike logo. It looks like a big basketball shoe. It's black in the front. The laces have like a wave look to them, so they're not straight laces across left to right. They have a wavy look, and then it has the light blue light on the bottom.
And there's no bow at the top. They're just sort of laces inside there. I put my foot in and press a button, and they tighten up, right?
Yes, and the wavy part of the lace is actually just a silk screen. So they're big laces.
There it is.
They're pretty fat laces.
Do you have to charge them?
Yeah,
It has
you
a
gotta-
light, of course.
Maybe they're
Well, no.
charged by your walking, like a watch, like a
That's
wristwatch.
too much technology to put in a shoe.
I guess there is. I'm actually imagining a use case for this. So loafers or Merrell's, elastic shoes, they don't give you the kind of support that a laced-up shoe does. They just don't. So one case that I could see this being useful is it gives you a better grip, better support and it would be just as easy to put on as one of those other shoes.
There's an accessibility issue too, right? Like if you have one hand or have lost fingers and it's difficult to tie your laces.
There you go.
There you go. You don't have to wear Velcro shoes and be mocked.
Or flip-flops.
Yeah.
So you could put a motor in your shoe and self-tighten it to
Does it
bruise your
actually?
foot.
Are you sure it's a motor? It's not like memory steel or anything like that they can apply a little bit of current to and it
Michael
cinches
J.
up.
Fox, he demoed. I thought it was going to look more like the original, but he demoed this shoe about 6 months ago on YouTube. He said that Nike's finally making these. It's going to be out a year late, but they're going to make them.
They can make micro adjustments. I don't know if it actually is a motor. If you look on the bottom of the shoe, it looks like there is a big block on the bottom where the light is.
Got it.
Like,
and that thing comes out to charge.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. I don't think it pops out. I just think that's that's what houses the motor.
How much are they?
They did not say.
If you have to ask.
Yeah.
So it does come in different colors. None of them look like. It will only be available only to members of Nike Plus beginning in holiday this year, 2016, and you got to sign up to find out how much it's going to cost. What do you guess?
$500.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Like, you think about what those Reebok pumps cost back in the day.
Those weren't $500.
Those were like 500
Air pumps.
They were 500 today dollars, I bet.
Man, this is right for Austin Powers to come back, do another Austin Powers freeze, and he pumps it and explodes, and he over tightens it.
I wonder if there's a manual override. What if your motor breaks? Can't tie your shoe.
What if your Internet of Things gets hacked and somebody just tourniquets your toes off?
Right, because you want
Right?
this to be an IoT shoe because you want when you walk into your house, you want to automatically know where you are, geofence it, and then have it loosen up so you
Okay.
can just step out of the shoe.
That's right. Yeah.
And then have it charge on the magnetic induction pad.
Look, if these things cost $500, I want the shoes to walk over to me when it's time to put them on.
Oh, and then the lights on the shoes, on the induction pad, because of IoT, they should glow when it's time for you to take a walk.
I was just thinking I needed more blue lights in my house.
Right, the blue light should go. You need to take a walk. Mwah, 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 mwah. And then if you're if you do early morning jogs, it's dark in your house, you can still see your shoe lights, and just put them into the shoe, self tightens, and you're running outside.
So one of the interesting things about this is that they do claim that you can do adaptive fit while you're wearing. So if you're a high performance athlete, then you'll be able to adjust the lacing,
Right.
so that it's looser or tighter at appropriate times. And say you're, I don't know, I got nothing here.
Yeah.
This is completely outside the. This seems
you describing that sounds like it would be cool, but in reality, it's just going to be like these time gates. Like, from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. it'll be tighter because that's when you program that in. As opposed to the smart thing to do would be to tie into Apple Health or whatever other health app you currently use to have your pattern automatically tighten based on when it predicts you're doing exercise.
Nike's real friendly with Apple. I bet they're talking about that.
I think they're. I was thinking more in terms of like a sprinter. So like if you're a sprinter, you might want them a little looser on the takeoff to get a little extra traction, and then tighten it up as you get into
Does
that
it tighten
100
up when you walk
meters.
in the bad parts of town and so you can't get your shoes stolen?
Can you disable? Can you find my Nikes and disable the shoe if it gets stolen?
Yeah,
Right?
no tightened shoes.
Yeah, sorry, these aren't going to lace.
Right.
You steal my shoes, they're never going to work again.
They put them on, run away, and go, aha, press the
And then
button,
they
and then
fall
lubes
off.
off, and then they trip. They tie themselves together. The Bola shoes. The Bolo shoes, or whatever they're called. Things that we thought never would happen, they're happening. Nike Hyper Adapt power lacing shoes, they're happening this year. That's crazy. And let's just wait 3 more years for another thing that's going to happen that we never thought would happen.
More Star Wars.
Well, that's going to happen. It's happening every year for the rest of our lives. Indiana Jones 5.
How about that, huh? With Spielberg and Harrison Ford.
No George Lucas. Explicitly no George Lucas.
Did you read
Yes.
that? Did you read the thing about the making of the first Indiana Jones movie with the roundtable with Lucas and Spielberg, where they were talking about what they liked in cereals? It may be apocryphal, but it's a thing that's been on the
I
internet
like the
for a long
marshmallows.
time. Norm, you're so ready for dad jokes. Yeah, but it was flip flop from what I would have expected. Lucas in this possibly apocryphal transcript, Lucas had the interesting ideas and the good input, and
really?
Spielberg was the one that was all over the place.
Hey, age does funny things.
Yeah, so I don't know.
And apparently the rumor is that this was part of Harrison Ford's deal to do The Force Awakens.
So
No way.
Part 1 was I come back, but you have to kill me.
Part 2 is I come back, but you have to kill me.
Yeah.
Right? No Shia LaBeouf either.
Well, that's a good thing. Is anybody going to be sad about that?
I don't think it's maybe Shia LaBeouf. He's been plenty sad.
Was the word?
But clearly, Harrison Ford isn't going to be an action hero in this film, right? If this is 3 years from now, I mean, you saw him running in The Force Awakens. It's like that was enough for him, I think.
Gary pointed out that he's the same age as Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. So
Wow.
he's gonna be the mentor again, just not to Shia. And maybe do you think he'll be killed off?
I don't think Harrison Ford is going back into franchises he's done 3 or 4 episodes of unless they're going to murder his character.
What if it's like old Harrison Ford who frames the story and the whole movie's just a flashback and they cast a young actor? Whoever's doing the young Han Solo
Like Saving
movie.
Private Ryan.
Yeah.
Well, Chris Pratt was one of the people that was originally mentioned for this when it was just a rumor.
That's right.
So
He's in enough franchises.
That's great. I mean, good luck. Redeem that franchise, please. Let's just forget about 4. In fact, they should call this one 4.
I mean, he got married at the end of 4. I mean, it's a happy ending.
I don't remember that.
He kept the hat though.
he married Kate Blanchett?
Karen Allen.
Yeah.
Oh, Karen Allen.
Kate Blanchett, the Nazi.
She was a communist, not a Nazi. Thank you.
That's right.
I just watched the first one again for the first time in over a decade.
Perfect.
Did you watch it with your kid?
Perfect film.
Yeah, I did. It holds up. I love that movie so much.
Yeah.
Except for the part where he dives under a submarine and also the part where if he had never been part of that film, it would have ended exactly the same way.
I don't think that's true. You said that before, and somebody called us out on that in the comments, but I don't remember the argument because I have only slept like 6 hours this week.
If they had the Ark of the Covenant and they opened it, the evil spirits would have still come out and they would have all died.
Were you questioning how he survived the submarine trip?
Yes.
Yeah, because I wondered that too this time, and I don't remember thinking that as a kid. That
No,
just
of course
right
not.
over my head.
That's a serial
He traveled by map.
Yes.
Submarines do travel maybe, at the surface.
He just held on. He just held on.
He belted himself to the periscope.
He was soaking
with
wet.
diesel submarines. They stayed on the surface unless they were going to shoot a torpedo at somebody.
See?
Because they had batteries. They didn't have nuclear power back then. They couldn't stay underwater all the time.
Overthinking it.
Or they had to snorkel.
He was really good with that whip.
Okay, so Harrison Ford is 73 years old now. How old was Sean Connery when The Last Crusade was filmed?
Oh, good. Don't know.
59.
Wow.
So
And he's how old now? Harrison Ford?
74.
Harrison Ford's not 74.
Google
dare
says,
you.
73.
Wow.
I was off by 1.
You buy that, but not 74?
Wow.
Yeah, I'm telling you, he's not an action hero anymore. He's not cut out for it.
How old is Sylvester Stallone?
I'm just glad he wants to do it because I know he didn't want to
I
do
don't
Star
think he
Wars.
wants to do it.
Oh, I do.
You think he wants
I
to
think
do
he really
it?
does like that franchise.
He's doing Blade Runner too. Like he has to like some of this shit, or he wouldn't sign back up for it. It's not like he needs the money.
Helicopters don't buy themselves.
I think that helicopter crash was all part of the marketing plan for. That was how he got out of the pre-marketing for Star Wars. It's part of the deal.
Airplane crash
Helicopter.
on the golf course.
Oh, you're right. It was a plane.
Yeah,
I thought it was a helicopter.
yeah, it's an airplane.
I think he's done helicopter stuff before.
See,
he's
there's
rescued people.
inconsistencies in the story. He doesn't want to do press. They need a good excuse for him to not do press. They fake a helicopter crash. Disney can do that. They've got that kind of dough.
Oh boy. And then before we jump into some VR stuff, wait, hold on. Oh, I had one last bit of tech thing because we don't have a science minute this week or this a moment of science because Kishore's not here. NASA and Orbital ATK, they're going to set fire to one of their spacecraft this next week.
Like
Why?
to test it
To test it.
for safety.
Yes.
That's good.
That's awesome. They're going to load it up with trash,
Like an
separate
Orion,
it,
or-
and light it on fire
What are they hoping will happen?
to learn what happens when one of their capsules catches
So
on fire.
hopefully they don't do it when there's people inside. I think is the
No one's... Yeah, exactly.
Like
Yes.
the Apollo 1 fire happened because they had a pure oxygen environment and then a bunch of stuff that was flammable.
They want to... Fire starter. They want to
Yeah.
study fires in microgravity.
Oh, they're doing it in the...
Yeah.
On the space station?
Yes. The one that supplied the space station, stuffing the garbage in there, detaching it, and then setting it on fire
That's
in
the
space.
most metal thing I've ever heard.
Are they hoping to retrieve it afterwards? Obviously, to inspect it.
I don't know.
I bet they just have cameras in there.
Now, not the whole capsule. They're not like detonating the capsule. It's not
Right.
Burning Man. It's just a piece of material inside the capsule.
But they're detaching it from the space station.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Because
Yes,
fire
yes.
is the worst thing that can happen
Fire
in
is
space.
the worst thing that
I
can
mean, I
happen
guess
in space.
catastrophic decompression is probably worse, but
Yeah.
fire seems bad too.
Yeah.
Look at this badass airplane he crashed.
Okay, so he crashed an ancient fighter. It looks like a P-37 or something.
PT-22.
Wow.
Did you not hear the keys music? We're past that topic now.
Wow.
Can't go back.
Yeah, that's harsh but fair, Norm. I have to respect what you've done. It's a much tighter ship over here since I left.
All right, let's talk about some games. At GDC, there's, aside from all the VR stuff, there's still a bunch of gaming news that comes out, both on the console maker side, also on the PC side, also on the software side, because you have engines there. The game engines are really like the stars of the show typically at these events. So Unity, Unreal, Crytek, massive booths, SpeedTree, all the middleware, if they're not picked up already bought up by bigger companies. We're not super familiar with that stuff, but Xbox did make an announcement and talking about how they want to open up Xbox One to cross-platform gaming.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. So
Big
this
deal.
is something Sony's been on board with for a long time, because Sony had that Steam arrangement where you could play Portal 2, Xbox to PS3. You know, the Rocket League works from PC to PS3. So they've always been okay with people building multiplayer structures that work across platforms. Like Street Fighter V works the same way.
Doesn't Rocket League work Xbox to PC as well?
It does now.
Okay.
So they built their own internal thing. I think that the interesting thing about this announcement is that Microsoft is willing to allow other people to build multiplayer platforms that work on their platform. It's important. They didn't say, hey, we're going to let Sony build a Xbox Live client, but what they're saying is if you're a game developer, or probably more importantly, a middleware developer, you can build a tool that you'll be able to use to have cross-platform multiplayer play in the same way that Rocket League, Street Fighter V, stuff like that does. They also announced that Xbox Live games would be playable on Windows 10 with the Universal Windows app thing, which is kind of interesting. Did you guys talk about Phil Schiller's thing last week? No, not Phil Schiller. Sorry, I'm super sleep deprived.
Spectre?
The guy who came from Sony to Microsoft.
Okay. What did he say?
They basically are saying, hey, about the upgradable Xbox.
No.
Oh, you didn't? So they.
Oh yeah, we talked about that.
We did?
Yeah, we talked about the idea that it was pure speculation, making the Xbox platform more like a PC. We don't think it's never going to be like a PC. I mean, you could always have swapped out hard drives on Xboxes, old Xboxes before.
Phil Spencer,
but it's not like the core things, the things that are going to cost a lot of money. It doesn't make sense to develop those to be separate exchangeable units, especially since that fragments a market.
I think it's more likely that they'll have a 1080p native version of the Xbox One rather than something that chugs it. Like, it's entirely possible they could upgrade GPU and stuff like that and make that a more iterative process, on a more phone-ish schedule than the normal 7 to 10 years that a console cycle lasts.
Changing a GPU in a console, designing a console so you can swap out the GPU is non-trivial.
I'm not saying so you can swap out the GPU. I'm saying so they iterate hardware more regularly. So you have the Xbox One V1, the Xbox One V2, the Xbox One V3.
Okay, I see what
that
you mean.
run the same software at different resolutions
or different frame rates.
So, for example, 4K TVs are on the horizon. Neither the Xbox One nor the PS4 can run those games at 4K. But if you've used Dolphin at all, you know that there's a big benefit to up-resing, lower resolution games to the higher resolution TVs. There's no reason they can't do that. The platforms are close enough to PC now that that's possible. Puts a lot of burden on the developers.
There would have to be a whole new type of categorization for the type of games and visual fidelity level 1, 2, 3, however you want to do it.
Well, and it also means that you probably won't benefit from updated graphics as much because people will target the platform that has the most installed base. So
what's the upside for Xbox if they get cross-platform? Why do they finally want this?
Well, nobody's buying their console, or their console is being outsold 2-to-1 by the PlayStation.
Uh-huh.
So if they want to have a large pool of multiplayer, like if you have friends who play Destiny on the Xbox One, if you want to buy a game like Destiny or The Division or Street Fighter, big multiplayer games, there's really no reason to buy that on the Xbox One when there's a much larger installed base of potential people to play on the PS4. So this is a way for them to remain competitive. It's interesting that now when things are a little bit grim, I mean they're saying everything's okay, but they're definitely not winning the sales numbers these days. They're embracing this.
Is the inverse true for Sony then? Do they not want cross-platform?
Sony's always
the advantage there.
Sony's always kind of said, "Hey, we're open to this."
Right.
Remember, Microsoft had a huge lead in Xbox Live at the start of the last generation, right? They had launched Xbox Live on the original Xbox One several years before the 360 came out, and they had well-developed services that were easy to use and quite good at launch of the 360. Sony struggled for the first couple of years, and with stuff like matchmaking and party systems and things like that, and they came awfully late. Remember, at one point, Microsoft wouldn't let EA host their own game servers on Xbox Live. Remember, you used to not be able to play EA games online when 2K games, sports games, were available on Live. So, like, this is a thing. I think ultimately it would be great if you can buy a game, whether it's on PC, Xbox, PS4, Nintendo NX, and play it with your friend regardless of which platform they're on. That's what everybody wants who plays games.
Right on.
And then PlayStation and Sony did come back and say, we're open to this. Let's get a table and,
and
talk about it.
I didn't know that. That's good news.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the middleware actually makes it much easier for multiplayer to work now, and a lot of it is just locked in a platform.
Yeah.
Like, talking to some of the Oculus developers, we know that things that are made for Steam or on Unity, you can cross-platform VR play, and on the PSVR side really is whether they'll allow it.
I think this would be a lot of fun for the fanboys to, create teams based on your platform of choice and then go on Rocket League and have it out with the other guys. That could be fun.
Well, I almost bought Rocket League on the Xbox One specifically so I could go bottom feed and get all the people who've never played that game with my 6 months of expertise.
Wow, just a
and
confidence booster.
Just
yeah,
do a big long run.
Yeah, how'd that work out?
I didn't do it. I don't. I didn't. I was
it
like, I
could
don't have the
backfire.
time.
Wow, it's like Cartman.
It could be
Cartman
the Special Olympics episode. Yeah, that would be really grim.
No, it didn't work out for him.
I mean, I'm no Jeremy Williams, but I'm okay at Rocket League.
Hey, Jeremy Williams is no Joey.
Joey is an unstoppable killing machine.
What we didn't get this year at GDC were a ton of new graphics card announcements. Usually, NVIDIA makes their new GeForce announcements around GDC time. That's probably going to come, definitely coming later this year now. And AMD, their big announcements, well, they did have a VR video card centric announcements. They have a new Radeon Pro Duo video card, which is $1,500.
Holy cow.
Now, the Titan X is $1,000, so it's not that far much, but it is still $1,500.
It's 2 GPUs on one card?
Yes, and it takes the amount of power it takes two or three 8-pin PCIe power connectors.
I don't think 2 is unprecedented.
Yeah, 2 is not
2's
unprecedented.
normal, yeah.
Let me double check this.
Does it have the same problems that Crossfire GPUs have, or does it show up to the system as one GPU, one frame buffer, all that stuff? Do you know?
I don't know about that. But yeah, it's 3 8-pin PCI power connectors. It's called the Fury X. It consumes 220 watts typically, but can go up to 450 watts just on the video card.
Some people have 450 watt power supplies.
That's right, for the entire system.
I mean, you're looking then, you can get 1,600 watts theoretically out of a 15 amp circuit. So you're looking at, and really there's probably not a whole, like you might need a dedicated circuit for your PC if you put one of these things in there. Can you put 2 of them in a system? Do they support Crossfire? Could you put $3,000 of video cards in your computer?
I don't know. It is 2 Fiji GPUs on the same. Yeah, if the drivers support it, again, it will go on sale early Q2. So if you have $1,500 to spare, then
it seems like you're always better off buying a $500 video card now, a $500 video card in a year, and then another $500 video card the year after that, than one $1,500 video card now. Like, what do you need that for?
Content creators. So they're making this. I know.
I'm a content creator.
I know. Yep.
Does this have any of the VR advantages that 2 cards have?
Are there VR advantages for 2 cards?
Yeah, there was a whole NVIDIA thing where it supports every other. Was it every
frame
other
rendering?
Was it frame or scanline? But yeah, it was. One card would handle half the load.
But okay.
Yeah. They did say one of the reasons that you would need this is that they're working with an HMD manufacturer to do 4K per eye rendering.
So that's a 2nd gen headset or further.
Yeah. So if you're developing software and hardware and working with prototype hardware that can do 4K per eye, you're going to need this type of video card,
So this is a card for dev kits for next gen VR experience.
This is a card for John Carmack.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, he's building mobile stuff, man. He doesn't need this.
I think he would love this.
Did you see the Power VR ray tracing thing that they demoed?
No.
There were two really cool tech demos out of GDC from Engine and tech people. So PowerVR was saying that they have a mobile GPU that's capable of doing ray tracing or maybe ray marching. It's unclear exactly what they're doing on mobile, specifically with an eye toward VR for next gen phone applications. So 2017, 2018 phones probably. And then the other one was Unity did a video called Atom.
That was eerie.
That was really, really, I thought it was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Like all real time, some crazy lighting, and then brought it out and it was neat. I was pleasantly surprised by the turn at the end of that and seeing how much stuff they were able to throw at the screen at a time. It's worth watching if you haven't seen it.
All right. The other thing AMD announced also was an AR headset. It's called the Sulon Q, and it's a self-contained VR/AR headset with a computer in the back. It doesn't look like HoloLens, but they didn't actually make it. So it was something that was shown at CES, I believe, last year, Sulon Technologies, and now they've partnered with AMD. It tracks the world. What I heard was that the earlier model did like LiDAR tracking of the world, but now it's just optical, it's computer vision and IR. And so it maps the world and then can put VR and AR in your eyes.
Is it self-contained?
Self-contained.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. They put that big lithium ion battery in the back of your head. That's a nice thing to do, right?
So it looks like it has, I mean, what could go wrong?
So the graphics built into this and the processing power built into this can run the AR stuff, but it's nowhere near desktop level graphics.
And it looks like instead of doing a pass-through, it's actually using cameras and rendering graphics on top of the screen, right?
Yes. Yeah.
It looks like a wide field of view. It's not like HoloLens.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's using display.
It's a VR glasses
It's a VR
with
glasses
a big
with
camera.
pass-through. Yeah, with camera pass-through. So it's not technically not AR because you're just not seeing the real world, but they're using it for AR capabilities.
Huh.
I didn't get a chance. We didn't get to do hands-on with that, but that was. I mean, the interesting thing with this is that it seems like AMD needed something to show hardware-wise that was different, and they couldn't do like a Razer-style Me Too OS VR. You know, we're doing VR also, so they partnered with this company to do something a little different.
Gotcha.
Every time I see a new HMD, I just can't help but think 10 years from now how antiquated this is going to look. It's going to look like a black and white TV.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big freaking box that's strapped to the front of your face. People are going to laugh so hard.
Remember
at this.
your Palm Trio and your Windows mobile phone? They had keyboards.
Yeah.
Your BlackBerry.
All right, are we ready?
Should we talk about the Iwata tribute at
Yes,
the
yes,
IDGA last
yes,
night? It was absolutely lovely. I mean, you should go watch it on the Google Iwata IDGA tribute. They ran it during the show last night. It was animated by the guy who did the Braid animation.
The art was two
Artist.
animators that worked on it. David Hellman, who did the art for Braid, I think did a lot of the actual art for this.
The sketches.
The sketches, and I also want to believe they work with Chris Kohler from Wired.
I saw
to do some
him.
of that.
I saw him. He pops up in the thank yous at the end.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, it was really cool.
To do some of that scripting. But I think that video is important because it reminds you that in today, with video games being a mammoth industry, and there's still a lot of competition and a lot of skepticism and cynicism for new technologies like VR, and people like Iwata, all he cared about was having fun making games.
Well, and making
and
a
the
lot
joy.
of money too, just to be,
100-year plan.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to take a deep breath and thank the sponsor of this week's podcast. Sponsor is Squarespace. Squarespace, of course, you guys know, it's a service that lets you design your own professional website with zero coding and super easy to use, lots of templates. The sites are professionally designed regardless of your skill level. Really easy tools. You get a free domain if you sign up for a full year, and you can start your free trial today at squarespace.com. If you do sign up for a trial, please use the offer code TEST, T-E-S-T, and get 10% off your first purchase. Build a site on Squarespace. It's going to look a lot better than the site that I designed with Front Page 10, 15 years ago. Still, no one has found that GeoCities site. I did remember another detail about that site. Remember when you built a GeoCities site, you could pick like a domain. It was like geocities.com/something/something.
Okay.
Like you pick like what area you want to live in.
That is not a domain, but okay.
Right. It was a subdirectory thing. I believe the one that my site lived on was Hollywood.
That makes so much sense. Good old Hollywood Norman Chan.
Yep. Continue looking for it.
So what's the next? So the two clues are Hollywood,
And Death Frantic with no...
DETH.
Yes.
TIK?
I don't remember if it was TIK or TIC or TC. It might have been TC. Try all variations.
Oh.
DETH, FRAN, TC, TIC. Who knows? The no prize is still up for grabs. So thank you, Squarespace, for making websites so much easier to design and for domains that you can remember without having to dig into the past and come up with weird aliases. But now it's also time for play. Virtual reality this week. We made it 35 minutes without going to talk about this week's experience in virtual reality.
Yeah, well, those Back to the Future shoes took us a long way.
I got to go in like 15 minutes.
Okay, let's get through everything.
Kidding.
So
Kidding.
there's so much to talk about. I do want to talk about each of the platforms one at a time because there were events and demo sessions for each, and we can talk about it starting like kind of chronologically because that's the way I'm going to remember it. So on Sunday, Jeremy and I went to the Oculus Game Days, which was their launch title announcement event.
Oh, not just launch titles, but yeah,
Yes.
all of the launch titles. Were
That's
present.
right.
They had a bunch of touch stuff there too, right?
Yeah, they had a bunch of touch stuff. It was and they did the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. They got a big venue in San Francisco. This is akin to what Valve did with their SteamVR developer showcase, where they brought for Valve it was 12 developers, and then they ran a bunch of press through it. Here it was a lot of press, a lot of people there, and their launch lineup was fun to announce. So.
Just to be clear, this is crazy late for a launch lineup, isn't it? Like usually when you're talking about a console launch, this stuff is announced more or less when the consoles are launched and pre-order bundles and all that stuff are set up.
Nothing about this is traditional. From the timing of the launch lineup to how many people have used early versions of the hardware before, DK1, DK2, to how backup pre-orders are right now. If this launch lineup was to convince anyone to pre-order an Oculus, they wouldn't be getting it until July.
Yeah.
So the launch lineup for them actually includes things coming out in spring and April, which exceeds the 30 titles. But 31 games was what they announced with pricing for March 28th, which is when many of the Kickstarter backers and when the people who pre-order early are going to get their devices. There's pricing, and then they also announced a new rating system for comfort. So every game for Oculus, internally, they will rate between one of three ratings. It'll be comfortable, moderate, or intense. And so some of the things that we wanted to discover was, as we play the games, how those ratings align with our expectations and our impressions and our experiences and what they were looking, what actually categorizes a game as intense.
I think it's important to note that Oculus is doing those ratings, as you said.
Is Oculus doing them?
They are.
Yeah.
Like I said, is this developer rated or
Okay.
are you guys doing it internally? And they are passing every single game through an internal process where they get their
Good to
games
know.
rated.
And some developers are very
mental note.
proud that like a game that if you just gave you the brief on how the mechanic works, you would say, oh, that's got to be an intense game. And they were proud that they got to moderate or comfortable.
Yeah.
So do they have human guinea pigs who are different levels of motion sick that they
Interesting
put
question.
into the, like, I'm interested. Sounds like a terrible job.
Yeah.
Like, I hope you get paid well if you're at Facebook and you're the the barf tester.
But
It's got to be better in the job of looking of banning people on Facebook.
Yeah, that's a good question. I want to know who's doing that because you have to hire people of multiple ranges of motion sickness.
Like I've talked to people before who work at companies that do VR stuff who, like, the person who was working in a completely unrelated department but gets motion sick easily ended up being an incredibly valuable asset for them because they were able to put them, all of a sudden they were sitting in a headset all day long trying new stuff to see what made them feel bad.
And I really hope it's not just a checklist. Like, do they use teleportation? Do they use this? Like, I hope it's actually people playing them.
Yeah, it's going to get harder to do that as more and more games go through that process.
It's one of those things on a kind of conceptual level. I'm a little bummed that they have a comfort meter, right? Like I would rather, I kind of like the hey, nothing that we're going to put. If we're putting this in the store, it's not going to make you feel sick.
I don't understand. You
Like,
would rather they don't do this rating?
I would rather they not put things in the store that make people feel sick.
Oh, at all.
But
mean-
you can't do that because then that would be lowest common denominator
Well,
for sickness. I don't think I think there's definitely like, but by intense it just means not comfortable for.
most people. That's what the language is, isn't it?
No, intense means, yeah, but I a game like we'll talk about some of the games specifically, but a game like Adrift, that's rated intense. I wouldn't want them to not release that or force the developer to change it just for the sake of making it moderate or comfortable.
Let me give a better example. So Temple Run is a game that you can download in the Gear VR store, right?
Okay.
Have you played Temple Run, Norm? You played Temple Run for 30 seconds,
Yeah.
I think. I have played that. I played it in the back of a moving car. It's the first time I've ever felt motion sick in my life.
Well, guess what game is not on the launch list?
Well, no kidding.
I think
that game shouldn't have been released. It's
So maybe-
it should be unplayable.
What could be happening as there are more games, and there's difference obviously between Gear VR and the Oculus Rift.
Yeah.
And Gear VR is actually more mainstream, so you would think that platform has more stringent controls and more direct control over the comfort rating. I hope that in addition to the 3 levels of comfort, there's going to be a cutoff, and at some point where the developer needs to resubmit their game and redesign it, and then we just don't see that. That doesn't need to be a transparent process. That's a developer relation issue. But I assume that anything that's rated gets to the point where it gets rated between one of these 3 is going to be playable and is going to break it. What Siri? What are you doing?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess we'll know in a couple of weeks,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So we played a bunch of games. We're going to split the conversation between the games that are at launch that use a gamepad, or even the remote, the mini remote, and some of the games that are there that use Oculus Touch, which actually have a lot of interesting things to talk about there. Those 31 titles, our fear was that we would go in and we'd see a lot of rehashes of Gear VR games, maybe modified slightly for Oculus Rift, or that we'd see a lot of ports from just traditional flat screen 2D games. And we did see many of those. I think someone did the math, and there are only 8 games on this list that are designed from the ground up new for Oculus Rift.
But I mean, we there are also a bunch of things that are ports from ports that make sense. So like the Project Cars is a good example of that, right?
Yes.
Like a car racing game is infinitely better in VR than it is even on like a spread 3-screen display rig. Just because you have the ability to turn around and you can check your mirrors just like you do in a real car.
I was surprised we didn't see more racing games there. I think that's such an obvious
It's kind
genre.
it's a genre that's had problems.
I mean,
right?
But the fact
Move to
they
consoles.
list like Eve Gunjack and Eve Valkyrie as 2 separate games, and they put them on they equate them the same as a launch title, that's a little bit bullshit, because
Each one is a launch title?
Yeah, Eve Gunjack is the launch title,
Yeah, I mean-
$10. Eve Valkyrie is the launch title,
For free.
$60, or after the fact. If you didn't pre-order, it's $60.
Oh, no way.
Yeah,
It's
$59.95.
So
$99,
Gunjack is probably my favorite game on Gear VR right now.
and it's a polished game.
It's a really neat like turret shooter.
Yeah. So that's the caveat though. Like if you can't just say 31 games, and so we're going to qualify that, right, by talking about some of the things that if you've pre-ordered a Rift, what are the things that we think you're going to be excited for?
Well, I mean, that's the question is like 31 games. Did they announce pricing?
They announced pricing for
you have
every single
pricing.
one.
Oh,
They have
good.
pricing.
For all
Yeah.
the release games.
Yeah.
So if they're 41 games at $60 each, 31 games at $60 each, that's a fair chunk of change if you
not.
want to get the whole run.
Right. And even if it's 8 games at the 30, the high quality, $25 to $50, 8 games at launch, that's not a bad launch lineup. It's not spectacular, but there's still going to be plenty to play in the first
I
month.
mean, the rule on console launches is always if you get one good game, it's a pretty good console launch, right? Usually you have a bunch of kind of meh titles and then maybe 1 or 2 things that are interesting and one thing that's good.
So we're not going to go through all 30 of them. obviously. But let's talk about some of the more interesting ones one at a time. And we've made a list here. So Adrift, which I mentioned earlier, this is a game that we played. It's made by 310 and published by 505 Games. It's Adam Orth, the guy who used to work for Microsoft, and it's the easiest way to build it is kind of Gravity in space in VR. Originally designed as a flat screen traditional console and PC experience, but adapted for VR. And it's one of those games that even though it is technically a port, it actually, VR helps it tremendously. So the gameplay is that you're an astronaut, you are in the aftermath of a disaster on a futuristic space station.
Cascade.
And you have to survive and find oxygen tanks and unravel the story.
Are you always in the spacesuit?
From what I understand,
For the demo,
we're in the spacesuit. So in the VR, what VR does then is put you more in the spacesuit than you would be if you were just looking at a flat screen. That feeling of immersion the spacesuit being a cockpit, of some claustrophobia, of the urgency to look around and find the oxygen tanks. That all is helped by VR.
It's got a lot of things going for it because it is like a cockpit game in that you're inside this suit and there's a detachment from the environment that it would be natural if you were in that suit. You know, the operators almost of a spacesuit, I imagine, are almost more like puppeteers than being able to use their actual hands, and that kind of relates to being in VR in a certain way. I think that it has that going for it. It's also a beautiful game, very slow moving, and all the motion is physics based, which is important, especially when it comes to acceleration and deceleration, in order for it to feel natural and avoid motion sickness. But I would say of all the games that I tried, it still was the most intense for me.
It was
because
pretty intense.
Every you can move in every direction.
Yeah.
As he was saying, up and down with the L sticks, so, forward and back, and you can rotate, and it's just getting the controls is a struggle, but feeling that motion is definitely an intense situation.
The controls mimic the four-way joystick and then the T-bar that's on an MMU. I mean, obviously you're using a gamepad to do that,
Right.
but you can translate in six dimension in 6 degrees.
Right.
But it's not translation in 6 degrees 1-to-1. So you're not moving, you're not holding the button down, and you're moving exactly the same amount. It's with momentum.
Thrust,
it's
right?
thrust and
Yeah.
momentum.
Which is all very slow and gradual, which is good. That's
Yes.
what they got to do.
So this is one of the few games on this list that I actually got to spend a little bit of time with, and I found it didn't bother me, but kind of nothing bothers me on that front, and I could still tell, this is going to make people profoundly uncomfortable. And I think he built stuff into the game so that you can pull the glasses off, go straight into the game. Like it's easy to get relief if you don't want to push.
Well, even
through,
if you're
right?
in game, if you hold down the L stick, it narrows your field of view into more of a television amount, which is something a lot of developers are doing to alleviate.
It's something they added to Minecraft, right? There's a living room mode in Minecraft. So
No, not putting it in a rectangle. So in the narrative of the game, there are two things he does to help with the potential nausea. One is the tunnel vision, which actually it looks like an iris closing in on your HUD, and the game fiction is that this is the visor like blocking light.
So it's an in-game solution to a real-world problem.
Exactly. It's an in-game solution. You press the button, and instead of getting to see all around you, the HUD closes in, so you see a small circle in front of you.
Got it.
Let your eyes adjust. You don't get sensory overload,
Right.
and lets you focus on just a small point.
And simultaneously, your suit uprights itself.
That's a separate button.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, so a separate button is that then your suit uprights itself to a logical orientation. Now, again, in space, there is no logical orientation. Up is any direction,
Right.
and down is any direction. So this is just a logical orientation based on the progression of the game and where you're supposed to go next.
So they label something as the floor in each room.
exactly, yes.
I don't know. This is one of those things that in a few years I think we'll be looking back on and kind of laughing about, because once we're building games that are VR native through and through, this shouldn't be a problem. Like you shouldn't have this kind of situation.
And I think it's a game. Talking to some people afterward, I think they're going to have a lot of fun playing this on a flat screen, on a 2D screen.
Yeah.
But I really want to play it in VR because that sense of immersion, like I felt playing it completely immersed in, like I was breathing slower as my oxygen level was going down. And there's some interesting design decisions you can make, like because your oxygen meter is also your thrust. So if you see the oxygen tank 20 meters away from you, and you have, a quarter tank left, you can decide: am I going to thrust fast there, or am I going to only tap a little bit and let momentum take me there. But then if I do that, do I have enough breathing time to actually to not die? Something that they don't take advantage of, and I wish they did, was the microphone on the headset to let it actually measure your breathing, to let that be a way to gauge
your stress level,
or the actual oxygen depletion.
Yeah, you could cheat that too easily.
I really thoroughly. It's difficult to overestimate the benefit of making that all encompassing a game that's tense like that, right? You're just in this. If you're not distracted, if your field of view is a substantial portion of your field of view versus the small square that's in front of your desk, it's awesome. It's super, super cool. So,
and that's the kind of thing where the port, while it is technically, a port to VR, I think it actually enhances it. And you can't say that, oh, that's not a dedicated VR game because it's going to be on other platforms. VR brings a lot to the table. In addition to 3D being a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Because when debris flies past you, that's also things enhance immersion.
Well, and it's easier to judge your momentum when you have 3D perspective of the world around you.
Absolutely.
Which I found important.
So another game that takes advantage of the tunneling vision is Eagle Flight. And this is a Ubisoft Montreal game where you play as an eagle. I think they showed a briefly a clip of it at E3 last year, and people are wondering, how are you going to get this type of flying motion in a VR game and avoid nausea? And
this uses a mechanic that we saw from some early Oculus demos, right after the DK1 came out, when all you could do was tilt your head around.
Yeah.
And it's basically a flying game where you fly where you're looking. And you can fly over the city of Paris, and you can fly down into the streets and around the canals and through chapels. And it's a good game because it pretty much avoids most motion sickness because they never jump you from stationary. They do jump you from stationary to moving. They don't accelerate you. So you're just, if you start the game, you're already moving, and you can go faster or slower, but there's not too much around you to cause you to.
It's not a game where you start and stop from perch to flight in one sequence.
Right.
You're perched, you look around, you say, I want to activate there, and then it fades out or does the letter bars, and then jumps you into an automatic your flight. Now, there is acceleration. The very act of turning is an acceleration. And so when you turn or when you accelerate and you dive down, it does the tunnel vision. It blackens a side of the screen or both sides of the screen so that you're focused more in the center.
It's not that apparent, though, to the player. It's
That's
more
right.
apparent if you're watching the TV screen.
Yes.
You can see how much they're bringing it in, but it's actually very subtle.
It's very subtle.
It's just the right amount to alleviate any kind of motion sickness.
Yeah, you see a lot of the screen capture or people filming of Eagle Flight or seeing it at the GDC floor. It looks like they're blocking out 50% of the screen, but it's really just on the edges. And that's a lot of the rendering. The difference is what goes into the headset and what gets projected out.
I think more than any other game there, this one involved the most head movement because it's the flying mechanic, it's the aiming mechanic. So you're constantly looking in different directions, and if you have somebody trailing you, or we haven't explained yet that it's also a multiplayer game. You can do 3v3 capture the flag. If you get targeted, you get this sound beeping in your headset, and you have to avoid them missiles. So you're just dodging and turning in different directions and trying to do sharp turns. Is a matter of looking to your left 90 degrees,
tilting,
looking to your right.
So the turn mechanic is actually tilting, not looking.
So you tilt your head?
You tilt your head left to right, and the angular tilt actually causes the turn, not so much the rotational turn. Now, you can't do flips, so they've restricted a lot of the movement for comfort's sake. And so while you can bank left and right real fast and dive up and down, you could never do a Star Fox style flip.
How did this compare to Birdly?
So much more fluid and much more comfortable than Birdly. It felt more like flying than Birdly. Birdly felt like you had no clip mode on and had some graceful motions, but here you actually had the feeling of soaring. And the multiplayer combat was really fun because it was 3v3. You have the kind of steal the bacon style mechanic.
If you screech, you shoot out this blast. Right. It kills the other bird.
Not if you verbally screech.
So it's
not a microphone. You press a button and then you launch like a wave. But you had, because of the city's pretty massive and there's a verticality to it, people can fly. There can be combat up in the sky and combat down below in the canals.
If you have the flag, the only strategy is to take the low flight path through the canals and through the streets. Yeah.
Could this have been a Quidditch game? Or is it too big?
No, it could have been, but I think the idea of the control being your head fits the design of it being a bird.
Did you use the gamepad for the rest of the stuff?
Yeah, the gamepad was used to slow down, speed up, fire your eagle shout.
Okay.
And I think that was it.
Is this yeah. Just in general, I didn't play enough of the Oculus games to know. How did you feel about the head cursor? Like a lot of those games, the games that I saw were using head cursor to like navigate menus and stuff like that. How did you have a feeling about that at all, or just kind of?
There weren't, frankly, a lot of menus that we had to go through because these were demo sessions where they would just throw you in. But I mean, because you have the gamepad, you're so comfortable with the gamepad, even though you can look at things fast. I would rather just select the gamepad.
These are internal conversations that we have all the time. It's like, what do we want to do? Is head cursor a good way to do this? No, we're not sure if everybody's doing it because of what you can do, or if it's better.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love feedback on that.
And then one game that we played in one of our free play sessions, free pick and play sessions, was Pinball FX VR.
Yeah, I made a point to play this because this was announced at that event. I'm not a huge fan of the Pinball FX series. They do their own tables, but they're very fantastic. They're not based on real tables, and the game elements are things you couldn't possibly do in reality. I'm a big fan of real pinball, but this made me a believer. I actually loved this game, and I can't wait to play every VR game and every VR pinball game now.
Are you going to make a VR pinball controller?
Yeah, I want to. I mean, I have for a long time one of my biggest complaints about VR or virtual pinball games is that you can't move your head around and get a beat on the ball. That actually affects when you're supposed to flip to hit that ramp or hit that lane. You need to be able to tell exactly which microsecond to flip, and you have to get the physics right. When is that ball going to come down the lane at just the right time? Now you can do that. I mean, that's the huge difference in playing real pinball versus virtual pinball. And so if anybody's into pinball out there, I'm telling you, this is going to be one you're going to want to try. I don't know what the price point is on the Pinball FX yet, but they and the Pinball Arcade have both talked about, or the Pinball Arcade has talked about doing Oculus support this year, next year. It's going to be great.
Pinball Arcade is the company that does the virtual real tables.
Yeah. They have a huge library now, so that would be huge.
And Pinball FX, you can find it now on iPad. You can play it on your desktop, because they're not their original design tables made for the digital environment. They can do crazy animations, and one of the ways that they highlight that on the flat screen side is they just zoom in automatically.
Yeah.
It just crops in. And here you actually get to look down and look at the toys. Something that you and I discussed was the frame rate and what 90 hertz brings to pinball. Because the blur on the ball is still there, the trail, the hockey puck trail, but that almost is unnecessary in 90 hertz because the faster refresh rate, you get to see the movement better.
Yeah.
And it's a game that I think would benefit even from 120 hertz.
Is the resolution high enough that you can see the far end of the table well enough?
Well enough. I mean, you don't need the accuracy up there. I mean, you just have to watch what the ball does up there, more or less. Maybe you do a little shaking, but all the accuracy is down by the flippers. And I was hitting shots with more accuracy than I've ever hit with a virtual game. So,
and triggers to pull the flippers, is that it? Or is it bumpers?
No, triggers, I think.
Okay.
And the stick is the tilt. But
would you rather have this, or would you have that digital pinball custom cabinet with a screen?
I was thinking about that.
Right?
With California Stream coming up, I was thinking, boy, it's another tempting chance to buy one of those. Now that I've seen this, absolutely, no question, virtual reality.
The VR, and this is exactly the kind of thing where a game that doesn't technically need to be in VR and is totally serviceable in flat screen platforms and even custom cabinet mods. The fact that playing in VR, like what do you think it brings?
I think beyond any question, just like when we talked to the Project Cars guys, they said if they take a expert driver in their game, and their game has been out for a year now, they have really experienced drivers, a simulation game. If they take one of their expert drivers and put them in a VR headset, they are substantially better, like measurably better at driving those courses. They're faster times, they're more accurate.
The freebie of immersion, the freebie of presence.
Yeah, being able to look around and be able to tell exactly how far away that turn is. Like, where is that tree? Where's that obstacle?
Well, check your mirrors. Like, it's really hard to check your mirrors in a driving game.
Yes, no, that too.
Yeah.
But I think the immersion factor, being able to even just move a little bit left and right, gives you a better sense of depth. And that's absolutely true of virtual pinball.
3D being free, immersion, a feeling of presence being free. No distractions. These are all things. I mean, it's a reason I think that even if you look at the lineup and you say, "Oh, Defense Grid, I've played that. It's a different experience in VR, and it actually is more fun."
I'm really interested in stuff like if you look at Killer Queen. Killer Queen's an amazing game that's a 5v5 arcade game. There's no reason you couldn't play Killer Queen in VR with 10 people that aren't in the same. I mean, maybe latency is an issue, but yeah, like you could open up a lot of experiences that are tied to a physical location with virtual reality.
Speaking of Project Cars, people did point out, based on the video we did, the shadows weren't enabled.
I guess that was an issue they were hoping they had fixed.
Yeah, so in terms of rendering, because these games have to be rendered at a high resolution than you would have normally on desktop at a much higher frame rate, where it's not just the average FPS needs to be 90, that's the threshold. They need to do some tricks. With Project Cars, what they told me is that they can render the interior of the card with perfect fidelity, like the maximum detail you would normally have on the desktop, but things in the distance, because of the pixel density of the screen, they can get away with lower texture detail and lower rendering in the far off distance, because that's not what you're focusing on when you're in VR.
Well, the other thing is a lot of, especially when you're bringing over an existing game, a lot of lighting model stuff doesn't work when it's rendered in stereo. So a lot of it's designed to work from one perspective only. And shadows are the same thing. Like a lot of times shadows are just a light source that renders a shadow on the ground instead of a light source, and some of those don't work in VR, in stereo either. So it's less of a challenge when you're building a VR native thing, but if you're building something if you're porting something over that was originally run, a lot of your rendering cheats to get the performance you need won't work with stereo specifically.
Another game we played that when we walked into the room and saw what type of game it was, we thought it would be a touch game, but it's not. It's a gamepad game, and it's a shooter, but it worked really genuinely surprisingly well. Damage Core.
Which one was this? I don't think I saw this.
So Damage Core is made by High Voltage Software, and they're the company behind Dragonfront, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well. That's the card game in Oculus. This is a shooting game where it's a look-based shooter. So you're moving your head to aim, and you're using a gamepad to fire. But the locomotion mechanic is teleporting instead of between nodes and between predetermined spots in the environment, between characters in the environment. You're possessing other robots.
Oh, so it's like Heist, or Geist, rather.
So
You possess other enemies.
yeah, you're an AI, and then there are waves of robots. You traverse levels. But you move through the level by tapping into fixed things like cameras. So you jump into a camera, then that lets you look at other parts of the level. Then it teleports you, and then enemy AI, which walk around, you can then teleport into their bodies and then fire at the enemies.
Republic did that last year on iPad. It's a super cool mechanic.
Yeah, and what it does is it gives you a different sense of spatial awareness in VR, because your understanding of the map is technically it's node based, because these are all the AI units and all the cameras. Those are all nodes, but they're dynamic nodes, and they're dynamic nodes based on the combat scenario. So if there's a wave of enemies coming at you from the front, you have the option of, okay, I can teleport in the middle of their group, the guy behind all of them, fire at all of them, or I can turn around, look up, and teleport up to the roof of this building and then snipe them from afar. Mm-hmm. And so that ended up being really fun. And I got lost in the sense of where that world was. It was one of the few games where when I took off the headset afterward, I didn't know which direction I was facing.
Was it easier to find those nodes when you could just look around with your head instead of having to kind of mouse around and stuff like that?
Yeah, there's a button you press, and then it's kind of sends a wave out, and then all the nodes are highlighted. So it's easy to pick that out.
What's interesting is that they got a easy motion sickness rating from Oculus, which it's actually one of the more chaotic games that we played, where you're jumping a lot. And when I say jumping, I mean you're jumping, teleporting into it. That's what they call it. They call it jumping. You're teleporting quite a lot. You are looking in every direction. You're firing your blaster. There's aliens right in your face, robots right in your face, and it's quite beautiful. And there's lots of particle effects, and it's just, it's a war game, but it's also very, very comfortable. So I think they really hit an interesting balance of comfort and frenetic activity.
Was there movement on the teleport, or was it instant?
No, it was instant, or was it like a quick fade? It was. There's no movement.
We've been experimenting with different speeds for teleporting.
Yeah.
And it seems like you can do 6, 7, 8 frames at 90 frames a second, and nobody feels, or at least the people we put it in don't feel bad.
Yeah, it's very cool. There's a boss character where you can't teleport, you can't jump into him yet. He's super huge. He's like 2 or 3 times the size of the regular robots. Until you knock out his 2 defensive shoulder pads, and then you can jump into him and use his gigantic laser blaster. In which case, then you're way up above the battlefield and you're firing down.
That's really cool.
Good sense of power.
That sounds super fun.
It's also another one of the mechanics it experiments with that you wouldn't think of being working well in this type of VR is a scope. So you think of like a scope game, looking down the sights of a gun or looking through a rifle scope. That makes a lot of sense if you have a track touch controller. Like you bring the actual gun up to your face and maybe it re-renders like Super Scope does the zoomed in image. Here, there's a scope function, but it actually is kind of like a warp in space. A circle just pops up in the middle of your screen, and you see the enemies up in that circle. Are it's like a whatever 10x zoom or something. But because you're using head look to fire, the head look rate speed changes when you're zoomed in. Just like when you zoom in,
much more fine control.
So think of it like mouse movements. Professional gamers, when they zoom in, they change the rate of their mouse so they can get precision control, and it's slower movements in the sniper mode. So they do that automatically, and that's one of those things that they need to fine tune.
Yeah,
I think they got it right.
It's interesting because you mentioned that after I played it, and I didn't even notice that while I was playing it.
That's why it worked.
It's still a very comfortable experience.
Yeah.
Did you guys play Radial G,
We did.
the Wipeout type game?
Yes. It was one that, Jeremy, you actually had more motion sickness than this than I did.
Yeah, I think it was probably second to Adrift for me. But I have played it on DK2. It's on Steam right now. If you have DK2, you can go. It's on early access, or what do they call it? On
early access.
Yeah, on Steam. And it's a tube racing game where it's very futuristic, and you're racing down the outside of a tube. You can hit these ramps, and you jump up in the air, and it's got a real good sense of speed. It's just quite a lot of motion. It's one of those driving games where I think you are in a cockpit, but it doesn't fully surround you.
No.
Yeah.
It's like a HUD more than a cockpit.
Right.
But that one, you can go up crazy speeds. They say up to Mach 1 relative to the game map.
Like it was, especially on the outside of tubes when you're doing like an outside curve. It on the inside curves is great because you could look up, and having VR gave you an ability to actually perform better because I was able to look way further ahead than you could if you were just on the monitor. Mm-hmm. When you're on the outside of tubes, it was a just terrifying death race because you had no idea what was coming next. It was definitely interesting. Like I think that kind of I think one of the things that's going to happen with VR is we're going to see a lot of resurgence of kind of old moribund genres when we look at stuff that has gone by the wayside. 3D platformers. Did you actually spend time with Lucky's Tale? It's not on the list. Sorry.
No, we didn't play Lucky's Tale.
So I played a fair amount of that and was astounded by the level of polish in that game. Like it is. The platforming is really tight and really incredible, and like is reminiscent of the great platformers of like the first 3D generations.
High praise.
But it kind of didn't use the VR a whole lot, at least the part that they were showing. It was just a tracked 3D camera that was on rails that was following that. And I was wondering if you guys saw more stuff that like really showcased why you would want these games to be VR in the way that, say, Pinball FX does or Project Cars does.
Right. Well, I think Pinball FX is a perfect game that people would argue that on its face, you don't need to play this in VR. Just like Lucky's Tale, some people would say, why you not play this on your...
You can put your 40-inch TV on the wall in a portrait orientation. Right.
And another game that people are making that exact same criticism is like Chronos, which is from the makers of Hero Bound. This is from Gunfire Games, the people who did Darksiders.
Okay.
And so... This, and I would make the argument that Chronos, because let me explain the format. It's a Zelda-like action RPG, and you move from room to room through the environment, and it's actually a lot like Alone in the Dark or Resident Evil, where the camera, your view, is in a fixed spot in every room. So as you traverse the level, you enter this door, and it just puts you then in the next room, and you're fixed on the top. You're looking over the map, or on the side of the map, or along.
They showed this at E3 last year.
Yeah. And then if you move and you fight the enemies there, or solve the puzzle there, and you move to the next room, and then the camera jumps. And technically, it is a game that you don't need to play in VR, but the VR aspect allows that view of that room, that camera angle, to be all encompassing.
Well, I mean, that's the thing that was interesting about if you played 3D platformers, you know how hard it is to do a jump into the Z depth, right? So jumping from the foreground into the background in Mario 64 is a challenging thing to do because it's difficult to judge that distance on the 2D thing, and that was the one thing that did jump out. It's really subtle, but like the ability to have real depth perception in the game made stuff that would have been hard to do in those types of games much easier.
What did you think of Chronos, Jeremy?
Well, so that it looked the camera mechanic reminded me of Alone in the Dark, and I would love to see Alone in the Dark and that kind of thing because I think it would be even more scary. It'd be even more sort of immersing in that way. And so I think Chronos has the same impact. I mean, yeah, you don't have to play that in VR. You could imagine that on 2D screen, but at the same time, what VR brings is you are now in that environment. I mean, wouldn't you rather, if you could not wear any goggles and turn your entire room into that video game space, I bet you'd choose to do that because that would be freaking awesome. That's basically what putting on a VR headset does. Yeah, I mean, the gameplay doesn't necessitate playing it in VR, but that immersion factor is something that you can't even.
And we'll get to this when we talk about
people.
The difference between Oculus and Vive and Sony. But a lot of the armchair criticism we're seeing is that yes, the immersion factor it's great, and there are a lot of these titles that are better in VR than on the desktop. But there's a difference between immersion and also trying to push the boundaries of presence and what VR can do. And And props to those people. I mean, we love playing room scale VR, Vive games with track controllers and doing all these crazy things that you couldn't do, on just a gamepad environment. And we want to see the spectrum of it. But I think what this lineup shows, and across this entire week, all the game show is that from a simple fixed camera game all the way to a full room track social multiplayer game, they all benefit from you being more immersed.
Well, there's no reason you couldn't play that fixed camera third-person game in the room scale world where you're walking around controlling the character inside your room.
Sure, yeah.
Right? I mean, that might be super, super weird, but it also could be really cool and completely novel.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff we haven't seen from anybody really yet.
Yeah, there's a game on Vive called Legend of Luca that does that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That's the dungeon crawler where you walk around.
You walk around and you see yourself in third person?
And you see yourself in third person.
Yeah, that's super interesting to me.
Just one last point on Chronos is that it is probably the longest game that we saw there in terms of the amount of gameplay that they want to include. What
13, 14 hours?
Yeah,
that's a lot of VR game.
Long. And so that's why it is so comfortable. I mean, that's why they've placed that camera there and you don't move around. It's a game they want you to play at 5 hours in 5 hours.
Can you play it on the desktop too if you want, or is it just VR only?
I don't think so.
I mean, most of the VR, the Oculus developed stuff, I assume, is VR only, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
I mean, who knows?
Oculus Studio sponsored stuff. The Climb, Crytek game. Jeremy, your first time playing it. I think you walked away with it happier than...
This is one of my biggest surprises because when you described the game to me, you're climbing a mountain, and they had two environments you could choose from at the Oculus event. One was the new one, the Alps, and when you describe this game to somebody, you think, okay, that's clearly a motion control game. And I expected that it would be when you first described it to me, but you said no, you play with the gamepad. Still, you playing with the gamepad at this event, and it feels like it's a wonderful sensation of climbing the mountain. You gaze to where you want to put your hand. There's white chalk lines along the mountain side, and then you use the right trigger to stretch your right hand out and grab that, or your left trigger to stretch your left hand out. And it's a really wonderful sensation. I think it's the only game that I played there all day where it caused me to physically sweat because you look down and you got
like you had vertigo.
Hundreds of feet below you. It's this beautiful environment, and your hands are running out of energy, so you have to maintain chalk on your hands. You have to grab two hands at once to rest for a moment, and then you have to jump. So when you get to a point where you can no longer climb anymore, you've played this. Right?
No, so the one I was playing, the machine was crashing a lot, so I didn't get to play it very much.
So you get to a point on the mountain where you can't traverse anymore, but there's the cliff over there you have to get to. You look, and nothing's unrealistic. I mean, these are things you would think a master climber would actually have to do. But
just like in Mission Impossible, too.
It's still exactly like that. But it's still terrifying. And so you look over there, and then you aim just a little bit above where you want to go, and you hit the A button, and then you jump through space, which is unnatural motion, right?
Yeah.
So this is your avatar is moving through space, and you're not as a player. You're standing in one place. But so when you reach there, you grab with one of the triggers, and if you time it right, you you make it.
Yeah.
If not, you fall, and that's also unnatural motion.
How
But
how far do they make you fall before you fade to black?
30 feet, and
Okay.
it's fading the whole
Fast,
time.
though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But none of that motion caused me any kind of, like, to fall down, to feel dizzy, to get motion sick. So it's props to them for managing the motion sickness factor.
You think that helps because your face is really close to the wall in front of you?
I have no idea. I really don't know. I mean, I would have thought that jumping mechanic would have caused people to fall over.
You said your hands were actually sweating.
Absolutely.
Like this.
And in the game, you sweat. So it's like it's all over. It's like
Yeah.
there's water dripping down your face.
I actually found that when I first played it, because as you get more your character gets more nervous, you see the visual sweat going down the screen, which as a mechanic, it blocks some of your vision, and you got to chalk up and stuff like that. You also hear your heartbeat beating faster. Those cues actually make you feel more nervous.
The heartbeat beating faster in the headphones is really
It's effective.
It's intense. Yeah, I have to say we haven't talked about the hardware at all, but the headphones on the final hardware sounded really, really good.
I was impressed because
Yeah.
they don't look like expensive headphones.
No, they look like little toy headphones.
Yeah,
You get when you get on the airplane or something.
They're also very adjustable.
yeah.
Like you're easy to bend them out and extend them up
Yep.
and down.
Which is an important point because sometimes in VR you're so immersed you feel cut off from the real world. So with these headphones you can allow just as however much outside audio in that you want.
Yeah.
I did go order a pair of less obtrusive frames though.
Frames?
Glasses frames.
Glasses frames.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because
You
they
need
stick
your
out too far. They
Spielberg frames for VR.
always hang out. They always hang in the headset when you pull it off.
How much of an improvement would it be to switch to contact lenses?
It would be great, but I can't wear contact lenses all day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Someone's gonna make custom frame mounts,
I mean-
prescription lenses to mount inside the Oculus.
I think I'm going to go get my
Kickstarter.
eyeballs lasered. Like I can't do LASIK, but I think I'm going to get the PRK because I'm tired of wearing glasses inside the headset all the time.
The last game I want to talk about using the gamepad that's coming out around launch is Dragonfront.
Ooh, I played this.
Dragonfront is the card game, also made by High Voltage Software. Jerry, you and I played this. I played a whole match,
Yeah.
and you play Hearthstone.
I'm still a little grumpy.
Did you win?
Yeah, of course I won.
Wow.
I had a lot of fun playing this. Virtual cards. We didn't know all the decks and stuff, so we spent a bunch of time learning the characters. But it was a more social experience. It was more fun as a social experience than as a strategy game in our first playthrough.
Yeah, this exemplifies how two people are going to be able to hang out in VR. I think in a great way. Like you see the other guy across the screen. Well, there's the game board, right? So
Yeah.
you both have your castle, you have your playfield in front of you, and each player is represented by a big mask in the background. I don't even know what I looked like. You look like a demon.
You both look like masks.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like, was I good looking? Was I like
You had a shield
noble
mask. Yeah, it was very noble.
Okay, so and your head movements are tracked, and so you can see that the person moving
Yeah.
around. They didn't have, as of our demo, they didn't have voice over IP working, but they say that they're working on that right now. It's probably going to be at launch. I'm hoping that the other guy's avatar will, move or something when the other guy speaks, so that it'll just be more.
It's pretty
immersive.
easy to make the mouth move when people talk.
and
Or just light up or something.
yeah. So it's-
in fact, actually, Oculus released a bunch of SDKs that do phoneme stuff for free. A couple weeks
even the
ago.
light up stuff I think would be enough. Yeah, and you're sitting in front of a game board, and it's not Hearthstone. It's not a ripoff. I mean, this
Well,
is
it's Hearthstone-esque, but there's positional stuff that
exactly.
matters.
So
Yeah.
you're attacking in columns, which
Yeah.
is totally unlike Hearthstone.
It's actually like Clash of Towers or whatever that new
Oh, your new addiction.
The
Clash Royale.
4x4 grid. You're moving down 4 lanes, casting characters, casting defenses, spells. You have a hero character. Everything's animated. The discussion we had afterward was, some people play Hearthstone in a window on a monitor, and do you need to be fully immersed to play this type of game,
Yeah.
or is this type of game where you should, because it's turn-based, should it just be in the corner of your VR room or in the corner of your desktop? Like, do you need to devote the 20 minutes? Is that fun to devote all 20 minutes, half
Well,
an
if you're
hour
playing with a
in
friend,
one?
it totally is because you can talk to each other, right? But if you're playing with internet randos, do you want to talk to internet randos?
Who plays with internet randos? That's
Well,
weird.
you play Hearthstone with internet randos.
Oh, I suppose that's true.
Yeah.
But the thing is, they designed it first as an actual physical game. Like, they knew they were going to make a VR game, but they still made the board, they made the cards, and they had the game experience across the table from each other.
Yeah.
That you don't get in 2D. Like,
Yeah.
You can totally emulate that in a virtual way, in virtual reality.
Well, I'm super interested in just the idea of Euro style board games in VR. You saw that Ubi showed a version of Werewolf running in. I think they were demoing it in Rift, but they were saying it was coming to all platforms at the end of this
Wow.
year. And that kind of thing, that's super compelling, right? Because it's not a difficult game to make from a mechanic perspective. But you can do all sorts of interesting. It brings that social experience without having to actually go to somebody else's house, which it turns out when you're us and have kids is expensive and difficult.
Yeah, what I wanted out of Dragonfront was more random social things to do in between the rounds.
Yep.
It is 1v1 right now, but if you imagine like a D&D style game, once you put in 2 or 3 or 4 or more people into that room, you're going to want for them to be able to do more things than just chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, interact with the environment, throw little things at each other.
So there are a bunch more of these gamepad Oculus Rift launch titles. We're not talking through all of them. Some people, we didn't experience any tracking sensor problems, but we did notice that the rotational tracking, it would default to rotational tracking if the camera wasn't facing your headset. And some of that stuff was playable, but of course, positional tracking is what gets you the extra comfort and some of that gameplay. I do want to talk about touch. So Oculus Touch was there. It's not coming out till later this year, and Oculus showed a bunch of games, one of which was a first-party developed game, Dead and Buried.
You love this game.
I love this game. I love how fun this game was and also what it exemplifies about design for touch controllers. Now, if you look at the just basic concept of this game, it's a multiplayer 2v2 or 3v3 shooter with revolvers and shotguns, with a revolving reload mechanic. You tell someone that, and they're going to say, "Is it like Hover Junkers?" And the shooting mechanic, yeah, there's similarities.
Yeah,
to
shooting
Hover
and cover,
Junkers.
but you're not creating cover.
But you're not creating cover, and more importantly, you're not moving around a big environment.
Yes.
The locomotion is limited to your play area.
So just to be clear, in Hover Junkers, you actually motivate your platform through space, through an enormous space. You hover, and you control that translation with your other controller. With this one, it's just standing and leaning and ducking.
And hiding behind barrels and behind poles, which sounds like it's a limitation. Sounds like, wow, Hover Junkers is way more functional than Dead and Buried. What I found, and again, to be fair, we only played for about 20 minutes, so I had so much fun not needing to think about the other things and just thinking about shooting. And they simplify the shooting to a point where the bullets aren't hit scan bullets. They are more like, you're holding a revolver, but it's more like blaster fire, so you can see the tracer. And if you're good enough, you can dodge. You have a laser pointer for your sights. You don't need to look down the sights. And the reload design doesn't require more than just the flipping out of the revolver and then flipping back in. There's no flipping out, tapping, and then flipping back in. So it's lower mental load than Hover Junkers.
I would like to try that one-on-one. I didn't do as well as you did. You did quite well.
Yeah, I was able to shoot from the hip. The laser pointers made it really easy.
I think you even maybe beat Palmer Luckey.
Yeah, he was playing with another journalist.
Well, you're a journalist. Anyway, you did very well. I did not do as well, but I think it was because I couldn't track both of my opponents. I think I was taking good cover from one of them, but I wasn't quite sure where the other guy was.
So that's strategy.
Clearly.
There you're talking about strategy. And I completely understand that Hover Junkers it's very robust. You're talking about large ships where you can put multiple people on the same ship. Someone could be driving the ship, another person can be building the fences, and another person can be shooting. And that feeling of hovering and that translation movement in a larger play arena, there's a lot of appeal to that.
You could also grab other weapons, which was a lot of fun. You could grab dynamite, which is right in front of you. Of course, if you hold on to it, it explodes, so you got to get rid of it. By throwing it, you can pick up larger weapons like grenade launchers, I think. And those were a ton of fun. They happen to be in front of you, and you reach out and grab them, and you fire them at the bad guys.
There's a simplicity and elegance to Dead and Buried that they intentionally did to, one, highlight the touch controllers and doing a pistol shooting game, and some of the social aspects. In the lobby, you're sitting at a table, you can do all the gestures, you can build avatar. You have your avatar, you're one of 4 characters or 3 characters, and that simplicity made it really fun in the demo. What we don't know is whether it will have a lasting appeal, where Hover Junkers, the the pitch is that because there's higher mental load, because it's a more robust game, it may have longer lasting appeal because you can actually get better, and it's more skill based.
Yeah, I would say the movement of the hover junkers does add a considerable amount of skill, but it also increases the motion sensitivity.
Yeah.
Well, I talked to people who play hover junkers more regularly last night, and basically they said, look, we were playing it wrong when we were playing with one person per ship, right? The game is, hey, look, there's a guy over there, go that way, and then one person is unloading with two guns, one person is
Building
driving.
defenses,
And,
one person-
like that adds a little bit more to it. Is Dead and Buried a Oculus developed game? Is it
Oculus
it's
developed
exclusive?
game. Yeah, some
Yeah.
ex-id developers. It's a small team, just a couple people, some contract work.
I would
but
say it was very polished.
very, very polished.
It has a beautiful, like, it's comical. It opens up with this ghost, like this old ghost pirate captain comes down in front of you, and he measures you with a big measuring tape. And
To get your IK right?
yeah, I guess so. And it's very polished. The environment is gorgeous. It's well done.
Did you feel like how did you feel about the touch controllers in the terms of like field of view and your freedom of movement and all that stuff?
Because again, the amount of space you're supposed to move, so you spawn random spawns in your environment, and there can be spawns upstairs or downstairs, behind the bar, behind some barrels. The amount of movement you're supposed to do in the game is kind of limited to that little area. I never lost tracking in the controllers. I actually was able to get the controllers fairly close to each other, so it didn't have any two-handed like shotgun mechanics. The controls, all the weapons and items were one-handed.
But were
items.
you able to move around in this? Did you get I didn't get to play this, but I saw they had the pads down on the floor that are supposed to indicate where
Yep.
you stay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get off the pads?
No.
Okay.
Didn't feel like I needed to, because there was plenty to shoot at from my spot. And
enough room to take cover.
Exactly.
I did talk to Brendan while you were playing, and he said, interestingly, which makes perfect sense, if you are aiming with one hand, if you hold your hand with the other controller, it steadies your hand in the real world, which
Yeah.
actually improves your accuracy in the game, which it just seems like a natural connection. to
And
make.
they have laser pointers on
They
these
have
guns.
laser
That makes a
pointers.
huge difference. It turns out.
So maybe I'd like for laser pointers the option to turn that off, or to be more intermittent
hardcore mode.
about laser pointers,
Yeah.
like maybe once every few lives or something. But that's like it's a gameplay tweaking thing. I think what they showed was something that's going to be accessible. It wasn't going to be mentally taxing, and for people who just wanted to play pew pew pew, with Oculus Touch controllers, it's going to be very accessible.
Yep.
Yeah. So enjoy that. VR Sports Challenge, also Oculus Touch game.
I'm so glad.
It runs the gamut from.
Because last time you guys saw it, it wasn't.
It
Right?
was
wasn't.
gamepad when we saw it at E3 last year. Yeah, it was still cool then. Like I understood hockey a lot more after playing that.
Right.
The
Playing as a
goalkeeper
goalie.
thing. Yeah.
So we played basketball and football, and basketball was an example of just like a highlights reel style thing. Doing dunks, shooting 3-pointers, not a full sim game. The football part of it, and it was fun. The football part of it was more of a simulation, still more of like NFL blitz type simulation, but having the presence of being able to look at your wrist as the quarterback and seeing the plays, to select the plays.
It's a
doing-
holographic display on your wrist, and you can rotate it to pick your play.
Did you find proprioception was difficult? Like, did your arm not line up with your real arm?
Perfect. Oh,
It did a
Oculus
good job?
does the best job of that.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you can hold that controller one way makes a huge difference.
Yes, exactly. And then the way you throw a football, it was a single player experience, so you're not throwing to anyone else. You're throwing actually to what would be yourself.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So you see the receiver, and you have you have not a laser, but like a dotted line telling you where the football's going to land. You do the throwing motion, let go of the ball, and then it teleports you to the receiver position. And how well you threw the ball is how easy it will be to catch.
Does throwing harder, like if you put more heat on it, or is it just like are you just doing an action to trigger an animation?
So those are in the VR Sports Challenge game. They abstracted different levels. So the basketball, for example, it actually matters how accurate and how fast you release the ball.
Okay.
And how dead on
and where
center.
you release it versus
Exactly.
Okay.
With the football, because of the motion, you actually use the grip as opposed to the trigger. it matters a little less. It's
So-
more about
Hold on,
just
when you
the
say
action.
grip, you mean that bottom
The
trigger button?
bottom button.
The aiming is done by looking at the ground. There's a reticule that appears on the ground, and as you gaze up and down, it moves up and down
Yeah.
the
So
field.
Oh,
it's
so you
Right.
aim with, so,
Base.
so that's the way you're supposed to. When you throw a football, they tell you to look where you want it to go.
Well,
Exactly.
it's a little strange because it can go very far down the field if you look up just a little bit. So it takes a little bit of
Okay.
practice to get your aim right. But if you aim right at one of your receivers, and then you throw the ball, then it becomes all about how well do you catch it.
Do you aim to the receiver or where the receiver's
Where
going
it's
to
gonna
be?
be.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
It depends on how well you aim and then how well you catch it. And the catching is like the ball comes in slow motion, and then you're getting your hands in the right spot, and then once the ball gets close to your hands, you have to grab it. And if your timing's off,
Yeah.
you'll tip it, and it'll go up into the air, and you'll get
And then
one
you
more
can bobble
chance.
it?
You get one chance as it comes back down to grab it again, but you can't like get two chances. It's like
That's awesome.
it's pretty fun.
That sounds really good.
Yeah, so really enjoyed that. An interesting thing among the touch controller developers that we talked to is just the notion of gripping and the grip mechanic. Because the Oculus Touch controllers, both the Oculus Touch and the Vive controllers have both triggers and grip buttons. They're implemented differently, of course, because the Vive is a little more of a wand. On the Oculus Touch controller, they designed the grip function, which is the middle finger button, to feel more like you're gripping, the pistol. And in a game like Dead and Buried, something that helps with immersion is that you pick up the gun from your holsters by gripping the holster, or gripping the butt of the gun,
Yep.
the handle. So, but some games, the gripping mechanic, like Job Simulator, gripping is with the trigger, not with the gripping action, and a lot of that has to do with the cross-platform stuff. Because actually, I think most developers agree the gripping mechanic in the gripping buttons on the Vive controllers are not as well designed as on the touch controller.
So they're much better on the pre than they were with the preview with the DK1 Vive, but it's still it's not as easy to do accidentally. And you don't have to squeeze as hard to do anymore.
Well, they're digital on the Vive and they're analog on the.
oh,
on the
it's
touch.
an analog trigger on the touch.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
And also, giving the Vive controller to someone new to VR or new to gaming, unintuitively, they think the trigger is the grip, always.
Oh, that's interesting.
With the touch, it might be different, but the people I've given Job Simulator, they get that trigger is grab.
Well, it's the
immediately.
easiest control
it's the
that they have.
easiest thing,
Yeah.
and it's analog. There's the more range of motion in that than there is with the grip action.
Do you find when you put people in the Vive that there's kind of two or three different ways that they can hold the wand?
Yeah,
Like
higher up,
there's a
lower
high
down.
grip. Some people try to put their finger on the sensor part. It's like I worry a little bit about the ambiguity of that.
I don't know. I think whatever people are going to probably own one of these, and they're going to get used to whatever they own.
No doubt.
Yeah.
It's just a some things are a lot easier if you know exactly where people's hands are in relation to the wand. And the Oculus stuff does a really, really good job of forcing you to only hold it one way. I didn't realize that trigger was analog. That's interesting. How long did you adjust well to using that trigger to pick stuff up?
So even within VR Sports Challenge and some of the games, like some games were trigger-based grabbing, some games were these grabbing action-based grabbing, and I maintain that for a thing like a pistol, yes, the grabbing action is more natural, but for picking up an object on the table, I still think that the trigger, because that's your forefront, your thumb and your index finger, and that in the real world is how I pick up most things.
Yeah, I wonder how much configuration people devs will allow with that, because with gamepad controls, you can usually go into any game now and say, "This is how I want the control to play." I wonder if they'll give you that option so soon out of the gate.
There's accessibility reasons to do that as well. Like if people have finger issues or hand issues, you want to give them as much flexibility as you can.
Last thing with the Oculus, it was your first time using CV1. We're all impressed. You're impressed by the weight distribution. You've used the Vive a bit. Used it like just a day before. I think we're all on the same page that we think ergonomically the CV1 Oculus Rift, like they succeeded in making it a comfortable headset to wear.
Yeah, it's so very light and comfortable. But I was also impressed by the Sony headset.
Yeah. So
Integrated headphones.
Integrated
It's
headphones,
important. It's like taking the headset on and off is a pretty big hassle, which I know sounds crazy, but if you're using this for hours at a time,
Yeah, it's like, what order do I do this in?
yeah, you drop the headphones back to your neck, and then you pull the headset off, and then you untangle the cord with the headphones, and like it's important that the headphones be good, that are integrated, and they are good,
Yeah.
which was really nice. I'm still like I worry that they went a little too far making it small, because the glasses thing is a real problem. And I know that they have a different liner, which probably isn't on any of the trade show demos we've seen so far. So I'm interested to see how that works.
Actually, I mean, and the Oculus is the only one that actually allows a little bit of light from the bottom.
I don't like
intentionally.
that. I know you like that.
I like it.
I want to be completely immersed.
VR covers.
I know.
Let's get one of those VR covers.
I'm with Will.
Yeah.
I want to. If I'm checking out of the real world, man, give me my Soylent drip and my catheter. Call it a day.
Speaking of Sony and comfort, the big VR news this week actually ended up being on PlayStation VR.
Yeah.
PlayStation VR, we now have a price and launch window.
Is it they gave a window?
Well, it's October.
Oh, that's good.
So there's 31 days in October. October 2016 is when PlayStation VR will be out, working with over 230 developers, hopefully up to 50 or so launch titles.
No, it wasn't 50 games by the end of the year.
Okay, by the end of the year.
I thought that was in the 18 months, actually.
I thought they said end of the year.
Okay.
But plenty of games, and it's going to be $400. So what do you get for $400?
You get the headset, don't you?
You get the headset.
Good. You get the
definitely
breakout-
get the headset.
Breakout box. You get some earbuds. You must get the camera because the headset needs the camera.
You don't get the camera.
What?
No.
You don't get the
Well,
camera.
they sold a lot of cameras. They sold a bunch of cameras, is what I was told when I asked about this.
I don't know about that, man. I mean, I own a camera, but that's just because I used to, work on the Move. But I don't. Jeez.
Well, no, you don't. Do you own a PS4 camera?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, you have to have the PS3 camera doesn't do it.
No, I know.
Yeah, that's called the Eye. So PS4 camera, which is about $50 to $60, and the Move controllers, which are about $25 each. That's not a bad price for the track controllers.
Well, and if you bought the PS Move controllers like a month ago, you could get them for like $12 or something insane.
Craigslist. They've now gone up in price. Everyone's buying them up now.
There's an article that the demand of the camera has gone up 975% on Amazon UK.
I mean, why not? It's going to be the same hardware.
Yep.
So I asked about this on Twitter yesterday, and somebody who works at Sony responded that the local Sony outposts will set bundles and pricing on those. So presumably, buying Move controllers used now, if you can get them cheap, seems like it's probably a good move. Buying a camera seems like maybe not so much, because I think you'll be able to get the camera and the headset with the camera a little bit discounted from the retail price.
Well, the point is, if you want everything, it's an extra $100, at least right now.
And you want everything.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't.
Are you telling people
I'm
they want
telling
everything?
people they want everything.
I do agree.
It's
with you.
worth an extra $100 to have hands.
Yes. No. I mean, and certainly some games will require it. However, the one game that you'll get for free, which is Playroom VR, will not require to have wands. Although they will support. I think they said they might try to support it. It's not going to be required.
So, in addition to the headset, you also get the breakout box. We're finding more details about what the hardware entails. Of course, they've said for a long time, it's 1080p OLED screen, full RGB stripe, 5.7 inch. Nothing really has changed in terms of the design of the headset and the VR functionality. You get 90 hertz or 120 hertz maximum, actually.
Is it native 90 hertz, or do we know this?
This is the conversation we should have when we get to the hardware performance. Okay. But otherwise, there's also there's the gasket style ring around the headset. The way you put it on ergonomically fits great.
It's the same.
I think it's the best. It's the easiest headset to put on. Mm-hmm. So in terms of differences, PlayStation VR is the easiest to put on because there's a simple button in the back that stretches it out, and then you can just tighten it up. And then there's another button on the front that lets you change focus on the headset. Move
bring it in closer
to you. Yeah, but it's also just it's not even focus. I mean, it really is part of the comfort process. Right. You put the back on like a cap, and the front is extended. It's like maybe half an inch away from your face, and you press this button down and bring it in, and it completely seals it off. The last one I tried, you couldn't do that. Like there was always light coming in the bottom. Now it's sealed off, just like you like.
Yeah.
And then because of the big rubber gasket, it actually fits over glasses. Much easier. So I would say
Does it have integrated headphones?
No integrated headphones. So I would say the PSVR is easiest put on. I would still say that the Oculus is the more comfortable over long-term use, like half an hour use.
I haven't used the Oculus for extended periods of time yet, but I I have to imagine that because it's made of cloth, it's going to be a little bit more breathable.
Yeah. And then what else you get is the cable comes HDMI out of your PS4, goes to a breakout box, which is an interesting device. Then we got some facts. We're confused about some facts in our video, so we're going to clarify those in just a second. The breakout box then goes to your TV. One cable goes to your TV. Another cable goes, and this is a long cable, 4 meter or so cable, that goes to the headset. But then there's also a small audio box that is where you plug in your headphones. So whereas the Vive, you plug in the headphones from a audio cable dangling off the top of the Vive, this one has a headphone audio port out that's further down the line. So you plug it almost at your waist.
Yeah. Is
where the audio cable plugs in, and that's how you get your 4.5 meters. Now the breakout box, what does it do, and what does it not do?
They finally said to non-developers, which is nice.
Yeah, so it doesn't do any graphical processing. It's not a GPU or CPU inside.
Well, it does a little bit of graphical processing.
Yes.
It splits.
It's a splitter primarily.
Because it's getting an HDMI signal. So I really want to see what that raw HDMI signal looks like.
I bet you're not going to be able to.
I want to.
I know.
Because it's potentially 3 images, or a really wide stereo image, and then also a separate image for the TV.
Exactly.
So you're getting this video image out from your PS4. It goes in the box. The box splits it to your TV, unwarps it, puts the other image on the headset, also does the spatial audio processing.
Now, the default arrangement is just the stereo. Like, most developers are just doing stereo to HDMI, and then it will split out just the left eye to the TV.
That's right. And unwarp it as well.
Unwarp it.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is important.
Absolutely.
But the box will also send a separate signal for asymmetrical gameplay out to the TV, and at different refresh rates and resolutions.
Yeah.
So that's why you need the dedicated hardware to do that. It'll do spatial audio. Now, what it doesn't do, and what we're most confused about, is does it do the frame rate doubling? And what actually entails in the frame rate doubling?
Hold on. So that means, presumably that means that they're using that HDMI connection not to send HDMI data, but just to send data to that box if they're sending different refresh rates.
Jeremy thinks it's just video, and then
they do like a 3-2 pull down to make it run the right speed.
I'm not. That's why we're curious what happens if you plug it out and plug it into a TV.
I mean, it could just be a high-speed data bus.
Don't put words in my mouth. I don't know what they're doing. I would love to learn more about it. But what I did learn is that, at least according to one of the developers, is it's not doing any of the frame rate scaling.
Yes. So the frame rate scaling, what happens is that when you, as a developer, you can set a game to render a performance benchmark. You can say this game's going to be 60 FPS. It's a shooter. We need high frame rate. And what the PS4 can then do is take the 60 FPS that's rendering out of the GPU and then interpolate, get you to 120 hertz. And then 120 hertz, the way you do that while also getting motion is then with things like time warp.
Which is their frame doubling.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, the bigger question, and to be fair, games can play at either 90 hertz or 120 hertz on the headset. Some of the demos we played were 90, some were 120. We really couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah, it didn't make
Oh,
much.
that's good.
Didn't
That's
make
good
much
to
of a
hear.
difference.
Didn't make much of a difference.
120 being one of their big advantages. I mean, no one else can claim 120 hertz. I was kind of expecting that to maybe make a difference of some kind. Maybe I'd be able to track things better, move my head, and be a little more
Well,
comfortable.
but it's doubled 120. It's doubled 60.
Oh, yeah, but it still should be a smoother motion.
I think it just means that you have less of the, you need less of the, the flickering.
Yeah. I mean,
at 120.
A lot of the early VR, I mean, when we were talking to Oculus about Crescent Bay and those prototypes, they were saying that 90 hertz was the bare minimum for comfort for most people. So it's good to hear that Sony got there.
So you're saying with OLED, if they're doing a low persistence, the 120 should actually result in a brighter image because you're getting more frames.
That's what I mean. Yeah. The low persistence, you flicker less, or the time to flicker is actually lower, which is good.
Did you?
So here's the technical question, because we know that games rendering out on 60 hertz will get double the 120. Does that mean that the games that are outputting that we see at 90 are actually only being rendered at 45?
I'm pretty sure it's running at 90.
I think it's running at 90.
Yeah.
So
I got that from your interview with Richard Marks.
Okay, so some games run at 90, and the ones, so it's actually the higher fidelity, more graphically intense games that do 160 to 120.
Right.
Yeah.
And everything else just runs at 90.
I don't know. I got from a developer that they were actually rendering at 120 too. So
yeah, you can render it.
If you're doing low poly stuff, then there's no reason you can't do it, and not a lot of complex lighting. There's no reason why not. I can't imagine they could do 45 and get away with that.
Well, a lot of games still render at 30.
I mean, on consoles, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The takeaway, somebody asked me on Twitter about this when they were announcing this, and it's something that I don't think people understand. Like there's a performance budget when you build on anything, right? So whether you're targeting 970 and a Intel quad core or PS4 or Xbox One, you can do whatever you want. Like you can make really low poly vertex lit stuff with a million dynamic lights and all sorts of cool shadows, but it's going to look like the best looking like Dreamcast game you've ever seen. You can also do really high resolution assets that are all tessellated out, and like how you choose to use the difference between Call of Duty and a fighting game is a good illustration here. You know, a fighting game uses most of its budget in 2 characters and then some backgrounds, whereas Call of Duty puts it all in a massive world map that you can traverse in a 15-minute period. And you know, the thing is, you shouldn't expect your PS4 VR games to look like your Oculus or your Vive VR games. They're going to be...
They have a tighter budget.
Yeah, they have a much tighter polygon performance budget.
Yeah.
So
And that's just, I mean, you can design art assets to work around that.
That's it. It means that you know, it's like the difference between the Wii and the Xbox 360. The Wii was a much less capable machine, and it ran at a lower resolution. But when you looked at Mario Galaxy, you kind of didn't give a shit because the art was really good, and it worked well within that constraint.
Yeah. So the games specifically, because they had a whole lineup of games, and they had things that we had seen on other platforms before, like Job Simulator, Waltz of the Wizard, but also plenty of exclusives and things that were just for PSVR. There are things that like the Super Hypercube, which look great. Again, that's one of those games that doesn't need to be super graphically intensive, but from a VR perspective,
I'm really excited about that game.
Really excited to play it. And then some new stuff. Playroom VR.
Yeah.
So this is
it's the only asynchronous game that they had there.
Right.
By asynchronous, that's a new term I think in VR. These people who've just been
Asymmetrical.
Thank you very much. Asymmetrical. People who've just been watching the Oculus and Vive space. I don't think we've seen this yet from either of those games.
Well, Norm and I saw a couple of things last year at E3. Is this the one with the little robots where you run down the path and you have to do the head dodging?
The concept of there being a VR player playing with other people on a second screen.
Yeah, 6 mini games.
Yeah. And it's made by the same team that made the camera Playroom, which maybe a lot of people did buy.
It's fun.
It out.
Yeah.
And it's okay, but that was very much a tech demo. This is a substantial bit of gameplay. So you got 6 games, and they're all multiplayer. We got potentially 4 people on the TV and 1 person in VR. And they're all sometimes they're co-op, where it's sort of like keep talking and no one explodes. There's a game where the people watching TV get a wanted poster and they have to describe how the criminal looks.
Yeah.
Person in VR has to find that person in the crowd and shoot them before the timer runs
That's
out.
fun.
It's a ton of fun. I mean, it's the graphics aren't incredible because not only do they have the tightest budget, they're doing it 2 different screens of graphics, but it works and it's a fun game.
But it's one of those things where good art beats good graphics at a lot of. I mean, it can at least. It doesn't always. Mm-hmm. Did they have the 2D game theater where you can play the desktop, the 2D PS4 games? Did you guys try that?
We didn't try it.
Oh, bummer.
There's not much. I mean, we tried it at Vive, and we've seen it in VR desktop.
Okay.
I mean, it works. It's exactly what you think it is. I'm not sure that it serves a purpose unless you're playing locally unless you're playing multiplayer. Unless you're emulating a local multiplayer experience with someone online who's also sharing that space with you.
Oh.
Then it makes a ton of sense.
So I played Overwatch with that in the virtual desktop application, not Valve's thing.
Why would you do that?
Because the screen was really big and it was dumb, and I could lean back in my chair instead of sitting forward.
Okay, but the resolution is going to be inherently much less. So
yeah, but I mean, I play
you?
games on my TV sometimes too. The resolution is much less than on my monitor.
Really, and you enjoyed that? Would you prefer to do that than playing on a computer monitor?
Depends.
Okay.
I feel like there is a time and a place that I will want to have a complete IMAX size, even if the resolution is worse. Like I feel like the appeal of that, even though I know it's a worse experience in a lot of ways, is there. Sometimes field of view wins.
Yeah. Other games, Battlezone VR, probably our favorite game there.
Is this wireframe?
No.
You would expect so.
You would
Oh
think so.
man, I'm
This
kind of
is-
disappointed.
It's actually very Tron.
Yeah.
The movie Tron Legacy.
Legacy.
Ooh, I like that.
And it's a 2-stick tank game. You're looking around just to look around, and also
It's not
Is it a head camera?
It's not a gaze shooter.
not a
Okay.
gaze shooter. So you,
Is that the term? Gaze
I
shooter?
think that's Carmack's term.
Okay.
yeah. The motion in this game was so much fun.
So you start out in this game inside of a tank, and you're not in an environment yet, and the tank geometry like unfolds around you, and it's a wonderful sense of scale.
It's like flat shaded vertex stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's beautiful. So it has like retro respect without being wireframe and flat shaded, but it's gorgeous. And you're surrounded in this tank, and then you come up to this very polygon environment, and you start to drive around, and you go up hills. You can't jump. They said they had that in there at one point, but it caused too much motion sickness. But then come the bad guys, and you're aiming your turret with left and right, and then you have an up and down.
So you look left and right to turn. The sticks do strafing.
Interesting.
Well, you don't look with your head left and right.
I'm sorry. You look.
You steer left and right.
So it's a 2-stick shooter style. So the right stick does turn and pitch, and the left stick does translation.
Yeah.
Got it.
And then,
so it's like a hover tank.
Yes, exactly. And it felt like you were hovering in a tank. The amount of glide you got as you move around that reduces the sudden acceleration helps for combat. You lead your shots.
Strafe.
Can you like use hills and stuff to kind of
There's minor elevation.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's lobbing of shots, and then they scale at the bad guys. They come out over the top of you. You charge up your EMP, and then.
Is this PSVR exclusive, or is this coming to everything?
I believe it's exclusive.
Okay. I assume at this point everything they're showing is probably
I think
exclusive.
they're launching exclusively. Maybe I think they might be expanding after that.
Oh, so there's so exclusive window maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Riggs, another game we played, combat multiplayer game. We played 3v3. You're in a mech.
Local or online?
Online.
Okay.
Yeah. You have 6 headsets. You only do 1 headset for PlayStation. So this one, you're kind of like a sports mech game. You're shooting other mechs, and then you are the ball. You got to jump through the hoop, jump through the ring to score.
This was a gaze shooter.
This one was a gaze shooter because you looked around to fire people with three different attack modes. You can have your repair mode, your fast movement mode, or artillery mode. I enjoyed the heck out of this game.
Yeah. This one gave me the most motion sickness, maybe the only motion sickness. No, not the only, but it certainly was intense. More so than Battlezone.
Were you just popping ginger Altoids all day when you were down there?
I need them.
Okay.
But you can jump in this game. You're looking around the whole time. Also, I think importantly to me, I can really, I don't know what it was, but I could tell there was a frame rate issue, and some sort of time warp was compensating for it. So that when I looked, there was a slight lag behind the movement, and then it would catch up. And as soon as I put the headset on and saw the menus doing that, I said, "Oh, this is not feeling good."
Okay.
But it was a very intense geometric game. I mean, I can understand that they're gonna have to fight that frame rate issue.
Yeah. And then a bunch of other games. Headmaster, where simple.
I love Headmaster.
Knocking the soccer ball, a game where it actually will take skill, like the way you move your head and move your body to knock a virtual soccer ball.
It's like Rocket League, but without the cars.
Had good writing, clever writing, and then some higher end games that like I didn't resonate with me that much. Like Golem didn't do a lot for me.
What's Golem?
Golem's a game where you play, you use the one controllers, and you play a little girl who can control avatars in her room. Scale changes, and eventually gets to be like a giant 15, 20 foot tall, giant hulking rock creature.
Did you see more London Heist?
So London Heist is not a full game.
It's just the demos, right?
So all of the kind of various VR demos that PlayStation had been experimenting with Morpheus, including the Luge game, Through the City Streets, the London Heist shooting demo,
the thing with the flail and the crossbow and all that.
The deep into the putting you in the shark tank. All of those will be sold under PlayStation VR Worlds, a collection of 5 mini experiences.
Oh, interesting.
Actually, they haven't announced the price yet, but they'll be bundled in that.
So it's like those are kind of arcade. It's like arcade games or mini games, something like that.
Not even a lot of replayability in those.
I mean,
it's
the kind
more
of thing
scripted kind of experiences.
That's the kind of thing that you put people into when you first bring them over to try out the headset.
Which is what Sony did to you.
Exactly. Yeah.
One game I did play that I liked was called Thumper, it's like a psychedelic luge game made by a couple ex-Harmonix guys that went off to go make their own title. And it's playing music, and you're sliding down this...
Like a trail?
It's a kaleidoscopic, it almost looks like outer space, but there's not stars. It's just kaleidoscopic. And it's you're sliding down this trail. You have to turn at the right time, hit a button at the right time, and it goes to the beat. One guy was playing it standing up, and he was getting into it, dancing a little bit. And one of the developers said, "This is the most satisfying thing I've ever seen because I've never seen anybody play my game like this. I'm finally seeing it played the right way." And it was a lot of fun to play.
Cool.
I think that's going to be a fun one.
Did they talked about some social stuff? Did you guys get to try it at all?
No. So they the day after we went, Sony announced PlayStation like social VR.
It's
Which
like
is
Home 2.0.
Yeah, it's a series of social experiences. I don't read too much into it, but apparently it was received very, very well.
Oh, interesting.
They called it the chat room, VR chat room, their version of VR chat room.
I still worry that the problem there is that the adoption rate for headsets is such that most of the people I know who are going to have headsets won't have headsets for me to talk, that I would want to talk to, won't have headsets for me to talk to. Right? It's like the Kinect Skype stuff that came out with the Xbox One was great, except for the only people I want to do that with are my parents, and they don't have an Xbox One and aren't likely to get one.
Yeah. On the other hand, home always seemed like the metaverse. It always seemed like it would lend itself to VR.
I don't know. Home had a seedy underbelly.
You want to? Well, it wasn't Second Life.
Well, it wasn't that seedy.
One thing we haven't talked about is that the controller's tracked.
Yeah.
Which is a huge benefit. I mean, there's a couple things. Like they have the 120 hertz, and they have this tracked controller, which everybody already has. Like you don't even need the Move ones. If you have the camera and the headset, you can see your controller in virtual space,
which they can use to give you cues. They could use it to abstract different things. Instead of it being a controller, it could be a spaceship.
Yeah.
But they could also signpost and put holographic things on top of the controller,
which is important because you can't communicate to people visually unless it's in the game.
Yep.
Yeah.
And who knows where those buttons are if they're a brand new PlayStation owner.
Right. It made me wonder if for the Xbox or Oculus and Xbox One, if they ever considered an attachment to the Xbox One controller so you can track it.
I thought
plug it to the top.
The Xbox One controller was supposed to have IR, either LEDs or pickups, so that you could sync it wirelessly and say, okay, this face belongs to this person. He's holding this controller. This is Will's controller, but that never works.
Not with Oculus.
Yeah,
that was this thing that actually distinctively missing after having the controller tracked.
Yeah.
And just that extra 1 point of positional tracking puts you more in the game.
Yep, and reduces.
I mean, just
sickness.
press the X button is a huge deal. That's the important thing there, I think.
Being able to
say
what
press the X button,
that
then you look down and you know which one it is.
Totally.
Is a big deal.
Also want to give out to Sony PlayStation's Shu Yoshida. He stopped by to say hi. He doesn't listen to this podcast.
You got a shout out from at Yosp.
Got some tweet shout outs.
Wow.
And he watched our HTC Vive video.
Whose idea was the selfie, Norm?
My idea.
Okay.
I took a picture and then he took a picture
Wow.
with his phone.
You selfie swapped?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He's an iPhone 5S.
So he watches your Vive videos?
But that's what he said.
Wow.
Got the tweets. Speaking of Vive, and also let's play the transition music because that was an
so
hour.
many Norm retweets. Holy cow.
All right, we're in the final stretch of this thing. The last big VR headset, HTC Vive, room scale VR, hand presence at launch. A couple new things from SteamVR this week. First, the lab. So this is Valve's equivalent of what Sony's calling like their PlayStation VR worlds. They're a collection of demos, polished experiences that have been the result of their experimentation in VR over the past couple of years.
Will this be a free download?
So this one, the lab, is a free download. Everyone who has a Vive gets it. It'll just pop up in their
Yay.
Steam. Their Steam account, and we played 4 of the experiences.
This is where Half-Life 3 shows up.
Nope. No Half-Life 3. We played 4 experiences, not 3 experiences.
They haven't said exactly how
They
many.
said at least a dozen.
At least a dozen.
That's a lot.
At least a dozen, and that includes some of the old stuff. So includes the Aperture Robot Repair.
Right.
Includes the
They-
Secret Shop demo.
They've updated that.
And the Aperture Robot Repair?
Yeah.
What did they change in that?
They changed the teleportation.
They added teleportation, yes.
Teleportation. Yeah, it's much better now.
Yeah. So the ones we did play though were they're indicative of lots of different types of futuristic room scale VR experiences, from a very simple passive environmental enjoyment tourism thing to more of a game-like thing at the end. So we'll go through them one at a time, and we do have a video with all these similar impressions going up. That we'll go more in depth with later. Postcard was the first demo, and it was a photogrammetry demo where they mapped the cliff environment and then used the mesh from the mapping to create nodes where you can teleport to. And still walk around in room scale.
Yeah.
But the interesting part of this demo was that there was also an animated creature running around,
This
a
dog.
robot puppy.
Yeah.
That you can interact with.
That's cool.
Throw sticks around.
I mean, that's
Super
the benefit
awesome.
of photogrammetry versus 360, right? Is that you can interact with it in more interesting ways.
Super awesome. Next one, Slingshot. This one was set in the Aperture universe with the core, the orbs, So like the personality cores from
Wheatley
Portal.
and
Yeah.
et al.
Tons of different personalities, and you're slingshotting these cores into the giant warehouse of the Aperture Science Lab, into wooden boxes, into other core things. And so it's like a little mini game.
Okay.
But they use that to demonstrate scale, because the environment, even though you're only walking on your balcony area where you pick up the cores and activate the slingshot, you're looking far off in the distance and interacting with those in that environment. Next was archery. This is more so game-like.
So there's been an archery game since GDC last year.
The old archery game, you were in a nondescript environment, and you could pull your sword out and shoot targets. Now it's more of a medieval, cartoonish environment.
Okay.
Where you are on top of a castle wall, and you look down, and then you get waves of bad guys coming in. And then the same bad guys that you saw in the Aperture demo, where they're just stick figures. They're not stick figures. They're 2D black and white figures who are sitting at their desks. Now they're coming in to attack your castle, and you have to lead them with your arrows. You can light the arrows on fire still and fire those. You can now shoot barrels
That sounds like more of a game.
that explode, and you can hit targets that dump oil on these poor fellows. It's actually it's a lot of fun. I mean, because it is very much a physics game. So you're trying to get that lead right.
Right. So it's not just a physics game and demonstrating two-handed movement. It also demonstrates haptic feedback in the Vive controllers and things they can do with that to give you right cues. It's kind of the thing I noticed, for example, when we did the Aperture Science robot repair. When you open the drawer, the controller vibrated to give you friction, to simulate friction of the resistance of opening a drawer. Here, when you're knocking the arrow, when you're pulling the arrow back, the further you pull back, the more vibration you get, which again increases immersion and presence.
Yeah, absolutely. In the old demo, you had to reach behind into your quiver to get an arrow. Now it's just bam, 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 unlimited, right from the arrow, or the bow.
Zortex is the last one. This is completely new and an incredible amount of fun. You hold one Vive controller, which looks like a small drone, and you're in your room environment, which is actually smaller than your actual room itself.
Well, you're in a big sphere.
You're in a sphere,
science fiction sphere.
Yeah, and maybe let's say the diameter of that sphere is more like 3 or 4 feet. It's not that big, but you control your little drone by just holding it almost like a paper airplane, and you use it then to navigate around obstacles, around enemies, and shoot other enemies, and you hold down the trigger to fire.
Is there a scale thing at play here?
So what's at play here is the spatial awareness of where your enemies are. So whereas in Asteroids and Geometry Wars, you're talking about navigating on a flat plane,
A top-down
look, but you need to know where the fire is coming from. You need to know where the enemies are. Here, it jumps another dimension. It's a fully 3D environment.
Yeah, I would say it's a mix between Asteroids and vertical shoot 'em up in 3D. So not only are you trying to shoot the enemies, but you're avoiding their fire that comes out in an old shoot 'em up style with sort of arcs. But these are three-dimensional arcs.
Got it.
So you have to slowly move around them while still aiming at them.
And are they all mapped on the outside of the sphere? Is that what's happening?
No, they're all in your
Inside
sphere.
the sphere
You're
with
in
you.
the sphere with you're trapped with them.
The game does a good job, though, of only spawning things in your field of vision or slightly outside of them, not behind you. So, but although you can look in any direction, it's a ton of fun. You're as long as you aim, there's no button pushing. As long as you aim, you're firing, and enough hits destroy bad guys. If they're glowing blue, you can then reach your controller over there and pick up a blue orb. Enough of those give you a power up that looks like a gigantic Ghostbusters blast that you just beam through everything.
I like beaming things.
And it's a lot of particle effects. It's a lot of just stuff floating around you.
So it's interesting when you say you dodge the bullets. You physically, your body doesn't. It doesn't matter if you have no body presence.
I got to tell you, though, that took me a minute to get used to. Obviously, I could tell immediately that it didn't matter to the game. I could be hit, no problem. As long as my ship was safe, the game was. I was advancing in the game. But it is unnatural to see all these enemy fire coming around and not want to avoid
dodge.
them. Yeah.
But all that matters is that the controller dodges them, and the controller there's no abstracted acceleration. It's all one-to-one movement.
Right.
So it really feels like you're holding, like if you're a kid, you're holding a toy airplane and you're moving it around space and imagining, enemies at you from all directions.
Yeah.
It really had that sense.
It's like this I can't wait to get back in this game. It was probably my favorite. It reminds me of a Geometry Wars kind of experience in VR.
Right. And so there are about over 12 total experiences in the lab, many of which are set in that Aperture Science universe, the Pocket universe. There's a hub that connects them all, and the hub different things happen. There is teleportation that moves around, so they're doing things like not exactly like budget cuts, but you're holding the trigger down and you see like an arc to where you're going to teleport, and then they also show a grid on the ground to show you if you teleport, that's where your walls are going to be, or the edge of your wall. So it's much like the gallery.
They've also updated the room configuration experience quite a bit. So now you can set what the default orientation is inside the space, which they didn't. That was always a hidden thing that you had to figure out the hard way before.
It says point your computer monitor.
No. There's an arrow when you're placing the play area, and that's the default direction that you should be facing.
Got it.
So and it's kind of counterintuitive. You actually, I think, want it to be facing away from your desk, but it's you can at least choose now, which is good.
Cool. And then we also demoed, like you mentioned earlier, the theater mode, playing 2D games, playing traditional Steam games, and which they said, as long as the game runs full screen, it'll play inside the Steam mode.
Yeah. They said
What's the environment like?
it's very bare bones.
You don't see your own body. There's no chair.
Now, gotta say, this is early beta.
Yeah.
They're gonna keep iterating on it.
Yeah.
It's just one environment at launch, which is not even a living room. It's just sort of in a virtual environment.
but,
But the TV is humongous.
So I was gonna say, are you looking at an IMAX screen from 50 feet away like you did in the
No.
movie theater? Are you watching a 50-inch TV?
I would say it's like a 120-inch TV, and you're maybe 10 feet from it.
It's very, very big.
Does it fill your whole field of view? Do you have to look around?
I mean, it can't fill your whole field of view. I mean,
Well, it could.
That would be VR. I mean, no, it's just a huge TV. It's right there in front of you, and it's cool. It's cool that you'll be able to now play all of your Steam library in VR, because that's going to be a lot of bang for your buck for people who have a big Steam library.
So Virtual Desktop, which is a separate standalone application that I think, Norm, you and I have beta keys for, I'm not sure. It lets you do a curved monitor. So you can curve what's on your big monitor, and it just shows you whatever's on your Windows desktop. So if it's a full screen app, it shows you a full screen app.
Yeah.
If you have a bunch of Slack windows or web browsers or whatever open, you can look at those as well and use your mouse and keyboard just like normal. And that curved, huge, like 15 feet away, but 30 feet high and 200 feet wide, CinemaScope style, is super, super neat.
Mm-hmm.
It's not incredibly usable, but it's also much better than I expected given the pixel density of the displays as they are today.
I still look forward to being able to play internet multiplayer locally, or virtually.
Yeah, I mean, I would
locally.
love to be able to load up MAME and play some arcade games.
Sure,
with you.
or even like Towerfall. My kids and I play that a lot. It'd be fun to be able to play that online.
And then Valve is showing a bunch of other HTC Vive games at their booth this week. So things we tried out: Trials on Tatooine, the new ILM X
That
Lab
looks so
thing.
cool.
Jeremy, you and I both played that. I enjoyed it. So chatting with ILM, they wanted to create storytelling experiences, narrative experiences. I don't think they've gotten to the point where it's not as effective as the Aperture Science Robot Repair Lab. That was like the best, and I think they want to get to a point like that where, you're just progressing a story with your actions. You don't need to solve puzzles. There's some interaction, like using the lightsaber in the ILM demo, but it's not about killing stormtroopers. It's about progressing the story.
Yeah.
So for me, the Aperture Robot Repair is more about incredible, like what happens when you take AAA art and put it in VR and how well that works. I found that was I've also done it probably 50 times at this point, but I'm not overwhelmed by that. It's really neat, but
now imagine that's a 5-minute experience.
I'm just saying that the art aspect of it is incredible and it's gorgeous, but I think that's maybe too lightly interactive, right? I want something that's a little more gamey.
Well, and there will be plenty of games.
Yeah.
So, but I think what ILMX Lab is interested in, and I hope that people at Valve pursue it. And remember, the big thing with Half-Life 1 was how well the game was meshed with story.
Yeah, of course.
Like, imagine if instead of it being the 5-minute Robot Repair Lab experience, it is an hour long.
I guess what I'm saying is it would have to be more dense with story than the Aperture Robot Lab.
That's about getting more writers in.
Yeah.
And so ILM says going forward, they're going to put their writers, Lucasfilm writers and ILM resources into doing this. And like, I'm more interested in that type of interactive story than perhaps the 5-minute Story Studio thing,
Yeah,
which has its own appeal, but it's a whole spectrum.
I think
Yeah.
what you guys are talking about is the new adventure game design. I think this is going to become basically a resurgence in, if you call it storytelling, I think that's what a lot of adventure games were trying to do. I think we're going to be able to play those games again with fresh perspective and excitement.
Yep.
Where you're exploring environments and solving puzzles without a ticking timer, without any kind of sense of intensity. You're just trying to get through the game and enjoy it.
A couple other things. We tried the Unreal Editor in VR, and I know Unity
that's
has
awesome.
a VR editor now. Unreal Editor in VR has a great mechanic for moving around, because instead of you can be one-to-one in your world, but you think of the world that you're building as really just a miniature, like a small map. Like when you look at the world you're building on the desktop, you can zoom in and out quickly. So the ability to zoom in and out, rotate the world, and using the HTC Vive controllers, gripping the grip buttons and tugging the world, pulling yourself into the world and pulling it around
That's
you.
a super good mechanic.
That works
Yeah.
so well.
So you have some sort of extension, like a tentacle that you grab the world with?
No, it's imaginary. It's
Yeah.
all imaginary rope. So like if you hold the grip buttons down and you pull,
Yeah.
then it's as if you pull the rope and pull the whole world toward you.
Yeah.
With momentum.
Right.
So the faster you pull,
Oh, and it floats under you.
Yeah.
How-
You don't get a sense of dizziness from that?
you can do it if you slow, it's 1-1.
How did the menus and stuff work? Because you could place objects in prefabs and stuff like
Yeah,
that,
so
right?
you can put up content menus, detail menus. If you press the button, they pop up. There's still just VR versions of detailed 2D menus,
Yeah.
and you can scale them up and down, but I think they'll need to tweak those to be more VR specific.
Did you record this conk out, or was that a timer?
That might have been a timer.
Okay. Unity, they at one of their talks at GDC, they also demoed their VR editor, which they announced maybe a month ago now. It's the ability to do that stuff in VR and spatialize. I've talked about this before, but the ability to take things out of the traditional kind of 3 or 4 pane CAD window and interact with 3D virtual spaces in VR is incredibly powerful. So placing lights, placing your prefabs, placing your objects, placing your world entities, placing the cues and triggers and stuff like that for character movement for when things happen in games. Really, really exciting.
I can understand how that would be useful for VR titles where you need to get the scale right and you cut down on that feedback loop where you can just be in there and
Yeah.
make quick changes, how that would be extremely useful. Do you think that it's equally useful for 2D game development?
I think
Or flat screen?
I think it opens up anytime you're working with a 3D world. If you can interact with that 3D world in 3D instead of in 2D abstracted, it's like the difference between being a flatlander and being a three-dimensional being, right? So I think it means that people who have those skills, and it opens that up to those people who have those skills in the real world, but don't necessarily have the 2D to 3D translation ability. So if you're a stage manager, a stage designer, set designer, you can load up Unity and a Vive or an Oculus Touch and go place that stuff when you may not be good at doing that same work in the 3D CAD.
So my question is, I mean, at this point, it's still early, and they have to fix a lot of UI stuff and make it intuitive.
Like they have to figure out how that UI works.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And is it more useful as a tool for the end of production pipeline, where you've designed a lot of the stuff already and a lot of the scripts in flat screen, and then go in to do your final tweaks? Or do you want to do the other way around and do your layouts and everything in VR, and then do your fine tuning, your tweaks on 2D?
My guess is that it's a little bit on both sides, actually. So if you're thinking about like a game like Skyrim, where you have this massive world, if you can scale yourself up to be god size, shape the mountains, get them close to the way you want them, you can do the rough in there and then do fine detail work later and do things like, use the tree gun to shoot 1,000,000 trees out and use the river tool to dig a river through the middle of the valley and that kind of thing. At the same time, doing the individual dressing of spaces is, at least, I mean, assuming the menus and stuff are there, I think much more interesting and fun and probably faster in VR versus, trying to align a table legs with the floor in the 2D window. You end up just using a bunch of keyboard shortcuts, whereas with this you can just put your head down,
Yep.
and drop it, and when it lands it'll settle, and then you save it in that spot.
Right, because you add physics in there. And there's also snapping and stuff like that.
Well, I think it'll also end up making it feel a little less constructed and a little more real, because your dining room table you intend for it to be perfectly square, but it's not perfectly square with the room because people bump into it and it moves, and you're in reality your house is not exactly square.
That was my impression when I first saw the demo of that, is that it will lend itself especially to games like Little Big Planet that have a handcrafted feel to them. Now that they actually literally can be handcrafted.
We're running a little short on time, but now we've seen all three systems. We've seen a bunch of games for them. Oculus, I think, has done the best job laying out exactly what the quote-unquote launch lineup is going to be for people who get it day one. Whether that's actually relevant because your pre-order decision has already been made if you got it day one, remains to be seen. For Vive, they've been showing a bunch of stuff. We've seen a lot of stuff. They've definitely more people out there have actually been able to play the room scale stuff, but they haven't actually laid out what's available when and what the price points are. So it's a different purchasing decision. They're more selling on the capabilities of the hardware than the content exactly at launch.
It seems like Valve is letting developers, like, it seems like Valve is treating this just like Steam apps, right? You put your game at the store and you price it at what you want, and you say, yeah, I want this to be available for Steam sales and stuff like that. Whereas it's unclear exactly how Oculus is handling.
I think it's what is clear is that for all the platforms, if you've invested in it, you're going to have stuff to do,
which is great
day
news.
one,
Yeah,
which is absolutely great news.
Did your feeling about what to buy change after spending more time with it this week?
No, my feeling is still to wait.
Okay,
It's still to wait and try the hardware.
See if because who knows, you could get motion sick. If you have an $800 Vive and suddenly you're feeling motion sick after 3 minutes of this, you're going to be super sad.
And also, even though we have the Vive Pre here and it's very close to final hardware, the Oculus side, all of our sessions have still been demo sessions. They've been 15 minutes to half an hour demo sessions, and so we're going to really need the long-term use. So you still can't make a call yet until we have the final hardware. All right. So Jeremy went to use the bathroom, but we're going to thank Jeremy for joining this week's podcast recording. Thank you, Will, for joining us. I'm gone all next week, so
what are you going to do?
I don't know. What are you guys going to do?
That's
the real question.
Probably.
Yeah. Well, we'll get you a key, get you a code, get to the office, and I think we'll still have an episode next week. But thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for watching. And hopefully next week we'll have more to talk about. And until then, here's an oldie.
Hi there, I didn't see you.
There's a fine line between topless and side boob.
Send us more.